nearly 30 quadrillion iron ores, and an eerily familiar item. The moment Chen Meng touched the treasure, blood exploded right before his eyes. No culprit in sight. Only a tooth hiding a chip remained. Join Chen Meng as we step into the next episode. The distance from Chen Meng to that planet wasn't far to begin with. He looked at the clock on the screen and asked, "Xiao AI, is there a time dilation?" He knew that at the edge of a black hole, the flow of time would distort. If close enough, a single day inside the train could equal a whole year outside. Honestly, he still found it hard to believe he had escaped. His mind hadn't fully processed it yet. Theoretically, even if he upgraded all acceleration components to level 1000, he shouldn't have been able to escape that gravitational pull. He had even prepared for the worst-case scenario, ejecting all the planets inside the train, using their gravitational pull to create a moment of chaos, hoping to find a gap to escape. Yes, Xiao AI replied immediately. Our entire escape process took 12 hours, but 7 years have passed on the outside. The citizens on the planets inside the train's cabins have also experienced 7 years. The staff in the train cars were unaffected. During these 7 years, the train and planets like Cerulean Star in the cabins were in a state of lost contact. Lao Zhu and the others on Cerulean Star couldn't contact the train. They've sent a total of 38,920 communication requests. Do you want to reply right now, Captain? Chen Meng leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Yeah, tell everyone we're fine. Reply to all of them. So what about the Haomiao side? 7 years have passed for them too, right? Xiao AI continued. According to the retrieved data, the time dilation mainly occurred the moment we were initially pulled into the edge of the black hole. At that time, only 17 seconds passed inside the train, but 4 years had gone by outside. Afterward, as the train gradually escaped, the time difference decreased. Xiao AI paused for a beat, then added in a more serious tone, "The good news is that you didn't land on that planet. A planetary explosion alone isn't enough to create a black hole. The Haomiao civilization used some sort of trick, let's call it a black hole seed, hidden inside the planet. If you had landed, you would have appeared right at the center of the black hole. It would have been inescapable. The current outcome isn't bad. This is already the best-case scenario. Furthermore, this black hole is highly likely an incomplete one. If it were a complete black hole, given the train's speed, even with upgraded components, we wouldn't have been able to escape its gravity. And because we weren't right at the center, the gravitational pull wasn't absolute. That's how we managed to break free." Chen Meng stayed silent for a moment, then said hoarsely, "Handle all the issues inside the train. Once that's done, we're heading back to Haomiao again." Understood. Initially, Chen Meng thought Haomiao would plant a bomb in the planet's core or something similar, waiting for him to leave the train before detonating it to kill him. He even thought, "I have the train's armor. How could I die?" But he never expected them to pull a stunt like this. Clearly, Haomiao understood human civilization very well. They knew humanity's main combat power was wrapped up in one single thing, the planet train. As long as they crushed that train, human civilization would lose all its fangs. For a single target like a train, normally no one would resort to such extreme measures. But they did. He concluded to himself, "Next time, I have to treat them as the type who knows exactly where to strike the fatal blow." 7 years. Cerulean Star had lost contact with the train for 7 whole years. Zhang Yiren, who frequently traveled between the two places, suddenly found the entrance to the train closed. This wait lasted exactly 7 years. Master Meng, Lao Zhu sat in the Taiping City Law Enforcement Bureau office, staring blankly at the calligraphy on the wall, muttering, "What exactly happened on Master Meng's end? We've lost contact for 7 years. 7 years ago, there weren't any formidable enemies either. When I came to Cerulean Star, Master Meng was just preparing to head to Haomiao. Lao Zhu was the vice captain of the planet train, and also Chun Meng's close confidant. But he had lost contact with Chun Meng for 7 years. At first, to keep the peace, he hid it from Zhang Damei, Zhang Yiren, and the others, claiming they were still in touch and nothing major had happened, just to put everyone at ease. But as time dragged on, everyone figured it out, and Lao Zhu was helpless. The only thing they were certain of was that the planet train had encountered an unimaginable crisis. No need to worry too much. Zhang Damei sat in her chair, not panicking much. As she processed paperwork, she glanced at the briefcase on the nearby cabinet. My planet is inside a cabin of the planet train. If the train suffered a fatal issue, the planet would explode right along with it. I'm still alive and well, which means the train hasn't been destroyed. It's probably a tough situation, but not fatal. The briefcase on the cabinet used to be her personal mecca, but ever since she took the position of chief of the Taiping City Law Enforcement Bureau, trading martial arts for a desk job, she hadn't used it in a long time. Signing so many papers made her somewhat miss the nights she stood guard in her mecca, fighting hordes of zombies on Cerulean Star. Those times were tough, but looking back, I know that. Lao Zhu looked out the window, his expression complex. What worried him was that human civilization was too unique. All power was highly concentrated in Chen Mang. In other words, human civilization existed because of Chen Mang. If human civilization lost Master Mang, it would fall apart sooner or later. 7 years of lost contact with the train was enough to cause panic across many levels of society. Ordinary people couldn't reach the train, so they didn't know the details, but anyone in the know was on edge. If Cerulean Star, Master Mang's main base, was this chaotic, what about the other annex civilizations? Over these 7 years, who could guarantee there wouldn't be an uprising? That was the trickier issue. Right at that moment, Lao Zhu froze. Before his eyes, his iris chip projected a control panel. On it was a familiar notification, long time no see. Xiao AI. He stared at it for a few seconds, then, as if yanked from his chair, dashed straight out of the office, preparing to return to the train. Master Mang is back. Inside the planet train, a group of high-level managers had gathered. Biaozi, Lao Zhu, they were all present. Chen Mang leaned back in his chair, quietly scrolling through the 7-year development report Xiao AI had just sent. After looking it over, he spoke slowly. Actually, this special event can be considered a good thing. At least it forced the Aqua Blue planet and the other planets to grow up on their own. He took another glance at the overview images. Quite a few cities on the Aqua Blue planet are starting to take shape. He placed his finger on the statistics board, and it also flushed out the hidden troublemakers. In just 7 years, 13 planets have declared themselves kings, and 67 planets show signs of small-scale independence. Biaozi. Present. Biaozi stood up and answered crisply. Message Xiao AI. Get firing authorization. You lead a team and clear out all these troublemakers. Understood? Previously, Chen Mang had spent 380 billion units of iron ore to upgrade the integrated fire control system from level 200 to level 500, unlocking a new super effect. This system transformed the original heavy machine gun into a light energy cannon. It was slow to charge, but packed immense power. Normally hidden within the train cars, it only revealed itself when activated. Using this level of weapon to deal with internal threats on the train was complete overkill. Most importantly, after level 500, it wasn't just located in the train cars, but also appeared at every spatial gate. Equivalent to a satellite cannon, it could strike with pinpoint accuracy at any corner of every planet. And the power was controllable. Using it to clean up troublemakers was a perfect fit. After dealing with Biaozi's task, Chen Mang turned to the corner of the room, looked at the other Tianji Pavilion masters, and smiled faintly. The Xuanwu planet did very well this time. Even better than the Aqua Blue planet. There was almost no panic. He tapped lightly on the armrest of his chair. Losing contact for 7 years and still maintaining such order is enough to show your loyalty. The Tianji Pavilion masters replied in a deep voice, their faces serious. Let alone 7 years. Even if it were 700 years, the Xuanwu planet would remain loyal to Boss Mang. But in reality, he was trembling a bit inside. He had absolutely no idea about this. He only found out they had lost contact for 7 years after arriving here. He had been in secluded cultivation for the past few years, and during secluded cultivation, time is the most blurry concept. 7 years of secluded cultivation, to him, was as normal as the blink of an eye. The top factions on the Xuanwu planet were also strangely peaceful. Everyone was in secluded cultivation, with no conflicts and nothing to do. As a result, almost no one noticed that 7 years had passed. Maybe a few people doing business with the Aqua Blue planet knew, but knowing wouldn't change anything. Within the entertainment civilization, the hierarchy was so strict that without enough cultivation, no one dared to take the lead and cause trouble. And with the top faction staying quiet, those below didn't dare to make a peep. Therefore, during the 7 years of lost contact with the train, the Xuanwu planet was absolutely quiet. No probing, no pushing their luck to see if Boss Mang was dead or if the train had changed hands. It truly was loyalty, even if it was mostly achieved by accident. Chen Mang set the tablet aside and looked around the room. There are no major issues with the other matters. He continued, "Everyone, return to your posts. Lao Zhu, you stay. Work with Xiao AI to draft an emergency response plan." He emphasized every word. In case the train encounters this kind of situation again. If we lose contact, there must be an emergency protocol to maintain maximum stability. Understood, Lao Zhu replied, then turned to look at Biaozi beside him, feeling a fleeting sense of nostalgia. Biaozi had been on the train, so to him, it felt like they had just met yesterday. But to Lao Zhu, Biaozi's face in his memory had already started to blur. Meeting again now felt like bumping into an old friend after a very long time. Seeing that look, Biaozi took a half step back and frowned. "What are you doing? Why are you looking at me like that?" "It's nothing," Lao Zhu brushed it off. As everything gradually returned to order, Chen Mang decided to take a day off. Once he cleaned up the remaining messes, he would set off again. To the Haomiao civilization once more. This time, Chen Mang reminded himself to be more vigilant. First, he'd use the main light energy cannons to plow the ground thoroughly. As for the rest, it could wait. Talking in the ashes would work just fine. Elsewhere, in the Haomiao star system, the former location of the political mother planet had turned into an oval-shaped black hole. It looked quite small, like a miniature version. The leader of the Haomiao civilization was sitting in his office, looking at the image of the black hole on the radar screen. Zooming in, a train could clearly be seen struggling to escape the gravitational pull right at the center. The man sitting behind the desk couldn't help but smirk, letting out a dry chuckle. This is exactly the biggest weakness of a single-train civilization. Single-train civilization was the term for civilizations that poured all their resources into a single vessel. The ship was usually incredibly powerful, but the flaw was glaringly obvious. Once the ship was destroyed, the combat power of the entire civilization would drop to near zero instantly. He had prepared this trap for Satan a long time ago. A long time ago, he had noticed a planet with an extremely unique internal structure. The research institute concluded that there was a black hole seed inside that planet. It could form at any time. It only needed a little more external pressure to transform into a black hole. The exact mechanics were unclear, but it looked like an artificial setup, and it even left traces behind. From then on, he designated this planet as the political mother planet, the center of power for the Haomiao civilization. Policies were issued from here every day, but he had never once set foot on it. On that planet, only his body double made regular appearances. He had always been stalking the ultimate evil civilization, wanting to swallow up its resources. But Satan's existence made him extremely uncomfortable. He could only wait. Waiting for Satan to make a move, to walk right into his territory, straight to the political mother planet, and step into the trap. He just never expected that the one who ultimately fell into the trap wouldn't be Satan, but the human civilization. He muttered softly, "How strange." Thinking of this, he glanced at the Doppler radar on the adjacent screen. This was a level 500 radar, capable of probing the status of civilizations within a range of 1 million light-years. The human civilization was a newly risen civilization in recent years. A powerful faction that went straight from obscurity to a level 5 civilization in one breath. And they appeared in the Naya star system, a place that absolutely no one bothered to look at. And yet it managed to birth a level 5 civilization? He shook his head, not dwelling on it any further, and just chuckled as he looked at the planetary train stuck in the center of the black hole. It didn't matter anyway. He believed everything was about to end. He had finished all his preparations over the past few years, just waiting to head to the Naya star system to see what was so special about it. When he heard that the human civilization had destroyed Satan, he had genuinely been afraid. He was only confident in fighting Satan if Satan walked right into his trap on his own turf. But asking him to run over to Satan's territory to fight? He wouldn't dare. To put it bluntly, he was terrified of that civilization. But looking at the current situation, they seemed pretty ordinary after all. Just then, the office door was pushed open, and a young woman in business attire walked in. She followed his gaze to the screen, then let out a regretful sigh. It's a bit of a pity. 7 years ago, that ship didn't land on the planet. This is good enough. The leader of the Haomiao civilization smiled faintly. When a civilization rises too fast, their leader usually gets arrogant. It's human nature. Consecutive victories make people think they're invincible, leading to overconfidence. For the other side to be so cautious was truly unexpected. He paused for a beat, then asked directly, "But the outcome is still fine. Is your side ready?" "Preparations are complete. We can invade the Naya star system at any time." But, right after that, the image of the train in the center of the black hole on the screen slowly disappeared. The leader of the Haomiao civilization froze. Then, as if suddenly realizing something, he immediately tapped his tablet, activating the level 500 Doppler radar. Very quickly, he fell into silence. After a long while, he finally spoke, his voice noticeably deeper. "Suspend the invasion plan. That ship has escaped. It could return for revenge at any moment. Order all units to go on high alert." "Understood." The woman stood rooted to the spot in disbelief. How is that possible? Even if this black hole is incomplete, it's still a black hole. With that kind of gravitational pull, how could any ship escape? Just how fast would it have to be? "Enough," he cut her off, his voice cold. "It's already happened, so stop asking how is that possible. Pass down the orders." "Yes, sir." The woman left, closing the door behind her. Only the middle-aged man was left alone in the office. He sat still, staring at the image of the black hole on the screen, silent for a long time. All these years, he had been afraid of Satan. Now that Satan was dead, he was starting to fear the human civilization. He thought he would finally have some peace for a while. But looking at it now, it seemed it was too late. If there truly was a hell in the universe, he felt it was drawing near. The leader of the Haomiao civilization knew for sure that he would very soon be reuniting with Satan. And this time they returned, the enemy wouldn't be like before. What he had to face was absolutely terrifying firepower. Could the Haomiao civilization really block it? He felt it was almost hopeless. If they couldn't, then he'd just surrender for real. He had been wanting to retire anyway. But the moment that thought flashed through his mind, he immediately squashed it. Maybe 7 years ago, the human civilization might have accepted a surrender. But now? Definitely not. That thought was only allowed to pass through. It couldn't be allowed to stay. There was only one thing he needed to do: turn the Haomiao civilization into an iron fortress. Defend strictly against the human civilization's attack. Fight to the death, and maybe there would still be a way out. Chen Meng wasn't in a hurry to launch an attack. He looked up at the large screen in the train cabin. It was broadcasting the dream of a mining worker inside the train. Little Fatty was still standing in the frame. Less than a day had passed on the train, but 7 years had gone by outside. In Chen Meng's eyes, he and the kid had just spoken not long ago. But in the kid's eyes, they had lost contact for 7 years. Chen Meng thought to himself, with such a time discrepancy, he couldn't afford to delay any further. Every time he blinked, a whole lifetime passed on the outside. "You're finally here." Little Fatty stood alone on some mining planet in the southern part of the Nanmei civilization. He looked at the mysterious traveler before him. He looked much more mature now, calmer, and had lost a lot of his childishness. Clearly, over these 7 years, he had grown up quite a bit. He looked at the traveler, a bit dazed. "You must have been busy these past few years. I thought you were never going to show up again. It's been 7 years. A lot has happened. Family stuff, internal civilization stuff. Where should I even start?" Perhaps because they hadn't seen each other in so long, his need to talk surged strongly. "First is my dad." He spoke faster. "He's changed a lot. He doesn't put work first anymore. He started coming home more often. I heard he's making a lot less than before, but that's only compared to the past. I only just found out his real income." He swallowed hard. "I never thought that he's actually the richest tycoon in the Nanmei civilization. Way richer than the so-called richest man on paper." He shook his head, as if laughing at himself. "He's seriously rich, and he started grooming me to be his successor. Officially, I used to be a bit rebellious, wanting to make it on my own with my own two hands. But now I get it. Having a shortcut and not taking it, just stubbornly banging your head against a wall, that's just plain stupid. He hesitated, then continued. There's one more thing. 7 years ago, a heavenly palace of unknown origin appeared in the Nanmei civilization. They've been studying it for years. They only made progress recently. They found a very deep basement in the heavenly palace, and inside it was a safe. He frowned. But that safe is really weird. The government tried everything and couldn't open it. They call it a safe, but it doesn't actually have a lock or a keypad. It's just a ridiculously heavy block of iron. He lowered his voice, like he was telling a ghost story. I heard they even shot at it point blank with heavy firepower, and it's still completely sealed. No melting, no cracking, no gaps. He exhaled. Other than that, there's nothing else worth mentioning. The kid stood there mumbling a few more trivial things. Chun Mang listened in silence, occasionally giving a brief response, just enough to let him know he was being heard. The conversation ended. Chun Mang sat in the train cabin, looking over at the Doppler radar screen on the control panel. The Nanmei civilization was located on the other side of the cosmic void. This would be his next target. Before long, he would cross that void, head to the Nanmei civilization, and take back his heavenly palace. But for now, he still hadn't figured out a way to cross. The dumbest method would be to create a wormhole. To build a wormhole spanning 1 million light-years would cost roughly 1.5 quadrillion units of iron ore. If the cosmic void had a diameter of 10 million light-years, it would require 15 quadrillion units of iron ore. It was horrifyingly expensive, but still bearable. The only problem was, no one knew the true diameter of the cosmic void. If it happened to be nearly 100 million light-years, or even several 100 million light-years, the amount of resources required would be something he couldn't shoulder. He'd be stuck then. If he retreated, the resources he'd already thrown in would be considered completely burned. If he advanced, the road ahead would be so far it was immeasurable. For now, Chun Mang neatly handled the remaining tasks in the cabin, not staying any longer. He prepared to return to the Haomiao civilization immediately. The wormhole he created last time had been destroyed. The refrigerator he threw out had also been crushed by the wormhole early on. To go back, he had to build a new wormhole path. He spent 1.1 quadrillion units of iron ore to create a one-time, one-way wormhole heading straight for the Haomiao civilization. He didn't hide, didn't stop. It was just like strolling into his own backyard. When the planetary train slowly slithered out of the snake-like mouth of the wormhole and appeared in the middle of an unfamiliar universe. The train had once again arrived at the Haomiao civilization. This time, what greeted Chun Mang was no longer fresh flowers, nor was it a notice of surrender. The moment he appeared, several nearby planets lit up almost simultaneously like light bulbs. The originally azure planets suddenly blazed as bright as day. It was the sign that planetary-level defense weapons had been activated. Right after, Chun Mang saw an unbelievably blinding sight. The Haomiao civilization was using a magnificent fireworks display to welcome him. Countless energy cannons fired from the planetary defense systems, locking onto the planetary train from every angle. Next, the nearby space flashed as over a dozen wormholes bloomed like mushrooms after rain. Clusters of massive fleets poured out, their radars locking dead onto the planetary train. No warnings, no provocations. They just opened fire on sight. Inside the cabin, the alarm sirens wailed fiercely. This was the alarm for being locked onto by radar. Because it was locked onto so many times, the short beeps merged into one long, continuous wail. But on the control screen, a very calm notification appeared. No attack threat detected. The Haomiao civilization was strong, a veteran level 4 civilization, but that was all they were. The strength of the planetary train wasn't something a level 4 civilization could measure up to. To upgrade to a level 5 civilization, the prerequisite was having a level 1007 color firepower accessory. The Haomiao civilization hadn't reached level 5, which meant they didn't have that item. The attacks were numerous, sure, but they were scattered, messy, and unreliable. Chun Mang sat quietly in the cabin, his face calm, letting the ship take the full brunt of the first wave of attacks. In the silent universe, countless scorching pillars of light slammed into the armor and fizzled out. The level gap was too massive, to the point where they couldn't even break through the defense, level 1000 armor, against a level 4 civilization. Unless the Haomiao civilization pulled out another black hole, this was an absolute crushing defeat. Chen Meng thought, shoot to your heart's content. When you're out of steam, it's my turn. And next came the counterattack. Chen Meng slowly pressed the red button on the control panel. The 5 main A-cannon energy cannons on the roof of the train lit up simultaneously, their patterns glowing as they began to charge. Then, level 500 pillars of light blasted out, accurately picking off the high-threat targets around them. Planets, warships, they all just shattered in the scorching beams of light, turning into debris. Right at this moment, another alarm sounded in the cabin, a more unique one. Chen Meng glanced at the Doppler radar screen and chuckled softly. Just as he guessed, the Haomiao civilization had indeed secretly opened a wormhole leading to the Naya star system. And right now, they had already passed through the wormhole and entered the Naya star system. Clearly, they intended to send troops there to kill Chen Meng in the past timeline. As long as the army started indiscriminately bombing the Naya star system, with a bit of luck, they were bound to hit the past Chen Meng. This was a tactic with almost no counter. No one could protect their past self. If time were a great wall, then every node was a position that had to be guarded. Trillions of nodes. No civilization could guard them all. But Chen Meng had a way. Tracing back through space-time was a method civilizations acquired after reaching level 4. It was easy to use, but it had one flaw. To go to the past of a certain area, you first had to physically be in that area. In other words, if the Haomiao civilization wanted to trace back to the past in the Naya star system, they had to send troops to the Naya star system first, and then activate the traceback right there. And once they entered the traceback state, they couldn't leave their current range. The fact that Chen Meng had freely moved between the first universe and the second universe in that state was just a system glitch or a special mechanic. The solution, therefore, was very simple: leave someone at home to guard the house. The next moment, on the Doppler radar screen, the Haomiao civilization's army that had just emerged from the wormhole and shown their faces in the Naya star system vanished from the radar. Because outside the wormhole wasn't the Naya star system. It was a bottomless, bloodthirsty maw. The entire army, along with the wormhole itself, was swallowed whole by Xiao Lu. This was exactly how Chen Meng solved the problem. With Xiao Lu guarding the house, let's see who else dares to come. In the study, the leader of the Haomiao civilization looked at the stream of information on the screen, his face turning ugly. The assassination team's mission had failed. The human civilization had a starry sky behemoth with absurdly terrifying strength. Their troops were swallowed the moment they arrived at the Naya star system. This won't do. He shot up from his seat, looking at the generals on the screen, his voice deep and cold. Send 3 more assassination teams. We don't need to commit our main forces to the frontal assault. Send the main forces to the Naya star system. He suppressed his anger, gritting out every word. You all saw it. Even our main forces couldn't even put a scratch on that ship. That ship's armor is very likely level 1000, a general reported, his voice heavy. The gap is too massive. Our only chance of winning is to go to the Naya star system and try to destroy the human civilization from the past timeline. The diameter of the Naya star system is 100,000 light-years long. If we place the wormhole exits in different areas and activate the space-time traceback the moment we exit, that starry sky behemoth won't be able to catch up. Apologies, leader. A uniformed general on the screen shook his head. This plan is not feasible. Why? The leader of the Haomiao civilization asked, suppressing his rage. The general answered firmly. Creating a wormhole requires both the entrance and the exit to be in a stable spatial state. But it's unclear what's happening in the Naya star system right now. The areas inside and around the Naya star system are all chaotic and unstable. In that state, it's impossible to open a wormhole. The general paused for a beat, then continued. There is only one single area where a wormhole can be placed, but that area is exactly where that starry sky behemoth is standing guard. How did it do that? The leader of the Haomiao civilization growled. How could it throw an entire star system into spatial instability? It's currently unclear, the general said. We will send someone to investigate after the war. Don't give me after the war, the leader snapped, his face darkening. If we lose this battle, it's over. There won't be an after. You people and your damn procrastinating. He took a deep breath. What about the second plan? What's the progress on that? The second plan was to go deep into the cosmic void for several hundred light years, then activate the space-time traceback to return to 870,000 years ago. From there, they would fire a high-level main A-cannon energy blast toward the Naya star system. The power of the blast would gradually increase as time flowed, delivering a devastating blow by the time it reached the Naya star system. This was the ultimate killer weapon of a level 4 civilization. It consumed a massive amount of resources, but in a life-or-death war, there was no other way. This method didn't require a wormhole going straight to the Naya star system. It was a long-distance spatial attack. By the time the human civilization detected it, the attack would have almost arrived, or it would have already struck the past timeline. Its weakness was that the temporal accuracy wasn't high. They could only estimate a time frame, not pinpoint the exact moment. The second weakness was that traveling only 870,000 light-years didn't actually increase the power that much, making it hard to deliver a decisive strike. But right now, it was better than nothing. And yet, apologies, leader. The general on the screen shook his head again, his voice even deeper. This plan has also failed. Reason, the leader said curtly. The human civilization had already traced back through space-time at the Naya star system, returning to the past, the general replied. And they fired 100 level 500 main A-cannon energy blasts into the cosmic void. Main cannons have the ability to auto-track targets. Our shots were all intercepted by their cannons right in the cosmic void. We have currently fired 3 shots, and all 3 were intercepted. The general paused. Unless we fire a total of 101 shots. Only then can we overcome the number of interceptions, and 1 shot will make it to the Naya star system. Then just do it, the leader of the Haomiao civilization growled. What are you waiting for? Insufficient resources, the general shook his head immediately. A single level 500 main A-cannon energy blast consumes 1 quadrillion units of iron ore. The 3 shots we just fired already ate up 3 quadrillion. Add in the cost of the space-time traceback, and the military's reserves are depleted. There's nothing left. This weapon was absurdly expensive. The Haomiao civilization had level 500 main A-cannons, but they simply couldn't afford to maintain them. 1 shot was 1 quadrillion iron ores. How many mining planets would they have to strip bare just to afford that? Normally, level 100 or 200 warfare was enough. No one brought out level 500 for everyday use. It was something kept at the bottom of the chest. The leader still couldn't understand where the human civilization got the resources to fire 100 shots at once. That number was astronomical, unimaginable. Even if you picked up the entire Haomiao civilization, turned it upside down, and shook it, you wouldn't be able to shake out that amount of resources. Hearing this, the leader's face grew even uglier. He stayed silent for a long time before saying hoarsely, "If we don't fire level 500, what about firing level 100? Not feasible," the general replied instantly. The travel distance is only 870,000 light-years. That alone doesn't increase the power by much. Starting at level 100 makes it even weaker. Even if it reaches the Naya star system, it'll just be a scratch. I mean using low-level cannons to burn through their intercepting shots. The leader spoke quickly. Burn them all up, and then fire the level 500. Will that work? The general was silent for a very long time before finally saying, "Leader, when a low-level main cannon collides with a high-level main cannon, the low-level one will be obliterated instantly. It won't cause any attrition." Actually, the general slowed his words. This war can be stopped now. The human civilization chose to fire 100 level 500 main A-cannon energy blasts into the cosmic void to defend against our attack. They chose defense, not offense. And their space-time traceback point wasn't 870,000 years, but a point somewhere in the middle. The general paused, then continued, his voice lower. "But, leader, have you ever thought about it? If they had chosen offense, chosen to trace back exactly 870,000 years ago, then their 100 level 500 A-cannons would have flown a full 870,000 light-years and slammed straight into the heart of our civilization. From the moment that ship escaped the black hole, the Haomiao civilization had already lost. My suggestion is, leader, you should quickly take a portion of our people, along with resources, and use a wormhole to retreat to another area. That way, we might at least preserve a spark for our civilization. Otherwise, at that exact moment, the video conference went dark. The general's screen cut out. The signal was severed. Guards, the leader of the Haomiao civilization had a gloomy expression, his voice booming. Why did we lose the signal? Reporting to the leader. Another general in the frame picked up a phone, listened for a few seconds, and then spoke, his voice stiff. Commander Qian's command planet was just bombarded and blown up. He has sacrificed his life. That ship has destroyed the entire first wave of attacks we launched, and it's starting to wipe out our military planets. We cannot resist. The leader of the Haomiao civilization leaned back in his chair, not speaking for a very long time. After a while, he finally exhaled, his voice dropping. I understand. He looked up, staring straight at the screen. Everyone, hear my orders. Take your families and resources and head to the Shichao planet immediately. Prepare to retreat. After that, he didn't say another word. He pressed a button under his desk, stood up, put on his coat, and walked out. The study door opened. Outside was a tunnel cast from pure steel, lined on both sides with armed guards. The more advanced a civilization, the more it had to assume the worst-case scenarios and prepare contingency plans. Retreating was one of them. Every year during the census, the Haomiao civilization would select a group of orphaned teenage boys and girls and send them to the Shichao planet. Those children were the final spark, ensuring the civilization had something to pass on when they had to flee. Walking through the long, deep tunnel, the leader of the Haomiao civilization reached the surface. The surface was currently packed with ships. Clusters of troops and military personnel were lined up neatly in the open space. It was a terrifying force, enough to go toe-to-toe with any level 4 civilization. As a veteran level 4 civilization, they still had this kind of foundation. It was just a pity that all of it, in front of that ship, was as thin as foam, shattering at the slightest touch. In the sky, dozens of wormholes were clearly visible to the naked eye. Fleets of ships and troops shot out of the wormholes, landing on the planet one after another to assemble. He couldn't take everyone. He was only taking the military forces, the families of the officers, and all the resources they could stuff in. These were the things a civilization could take when fleeing. Everything else had to be abandoned. The leader of the Haomiao civilization stood still, watching the crowd grow thicker as more and more people arrived. A pang of regret welled up in his heart. He had been too confident. When the planetary train was trapped in the black hole, he believed the enemy couldn't escape. If he had been more decisive then and directly launched a devastating strike into the past timeline of the Naya star system, the human civilization would have definitely been wiped out. At that time, they would have had almost no way to fight back. But in the end, he was still too confident. He had never thought any ship could escape the gravitational pull of a black hole. But regret was useless. He didn't do it then because he wanted to save resources. Was he wrong? If every decision had to be absolutely optimal, how many resources would the civilization have burned along the way? How could they have ever climbed to level 4? No one could live like that. Just like you couldn't use a silver needle to test for poison every single time you ate a meal. If one day your wife actually poisoned you and you didn't notice, you'd just have to accept death. He didn't think he was wrong. It was just a bad probability, and he got unlucky. It was a tribulation destined by fate, unavoidable. It was just a hint of confusion flashed in his eyes. Where could they run to now? The surrounding star systems all had owners. If they wanted to hide, they had to flee beyond 1,000,000 light years, escaping the radar range of the human civilization. To do that, their only option was to dive into regions extremely devoid of resources, the backwaters of the universe. Those places usually only had a single star, a few small planets, and maybe not even a single mining planet. They'd barely be able to survive even after terraforming. He could only take everyone to a place like that first and wait for an opportunity. Then come back. As long as they weren't dead, there was still hope. Right at this moment, the leader of the Haomiao civilization spotted a general in the crowd. It was the very same person who had just reported via video that Commander Qian was dead. Now, That general was also leading his troops to assemble, preparing to flee together. The leader of the Haomiao civilization looked down at what the general was holding in his arms. He frowned. We're running for our lives. Why are you carrying a refrigerator? Are you planning to lug a microwave along too? It's not my fridge, the general replied with a serious face. It's confiscated loot. Before we leave, we have to bite off a piece of their flesh, let them know we aren't easily bullied. The general continued, his voice deep. That ship sent out many shuttlecraft. We shot down a few, and this refrigerator was inside one of them. It's incredibly sturdy. It took a hit from a main cannon without breaking. I found it strange, so I brought it back, planning to study it later. A refrigerator? The leader of the Haomiao civilization furrowed his brows tightly. Loot from that ship? You guys couldn't even break its defenses, only taking a one-sided beating, and yet you managed to pick up something from them? Don't you think this is something they intentionally gave you? He stepped forward and yanked the refrigerator door wide open. It was completely empty inside. Nothing at all. At first glance, there really didn't seem to be a problem. No way, the general said firmly. I checked it. There are no traps. There's only one thing. It's unusually hard. It might be a super effect from the human civilization upgrading this fridge to level 200 or even level 500. The general shook his head, still annoyed. I gotta say, they're seriously rich. Upgrading this kind of accessory to level 200. How much Murphy stone must that have cost? And even though we couldn't pierce that ship's armor, this fridge was picked up from a shuttle they sent out. The general shrugged. Besides, it's just a refrigerator. Even if it's upgraded to level 1000, what amazing thing could it do? It's not like it's going to spontaneously explode into a black hole. The leader of the Haomiao civilization nodded slightly. It was true that a super effect of an accessory couldn't deviate from its original function. No matter how much you upgrade a main A cannon, it can't spontaneously generate Coca-Cola. A refrigerator, at most, would only have effects revolving around being a refrigerator. He stopped paying attention to it, waving his hand. Tell everyone to get ready. Move out. His voice was a bit distant. Leaving home this time. We might never have the chance to return in this lifetime. At the same time, Chun Mang was sitting in the control room, looking at the Doppler radar with a rather strange expression. He had a habit. Wherever he went, he'd throw out a refrigerator first. Refrigerators were cheap. Throwing one out meant that if he wanted to return to that area later, he could just return, without needing to go through a wormhole. One of the refrigerator's super effects was that, within radar range, its defensive capability was equivalent to the ship's armor. And his radar could scan 1 million light-years. To put it bluntly, the refrigerator he threw out was practically invincible. Just now, he had released a few shuttlecraft, each carrying a refrigerator. The main purpose was to throw refrigerators. As a result, one shuttle was shot down, and the refrigerator was confiscated. On the radar, it was being carried straight back to the enemy's main headquarters. In fact, their entire main force had retreated to the rear, and they were lugging his refrigerator right along with them. Chun Mang sighed softly, but the corners of his mouth twitched upward. There's actually such a good thing, Chun Mang thought, bringing the door right into their own home. How convenient. Saves me the trouble of chasing them. He also made a mental note of one more thing, like jotting it down in a ledger. In the future, if he encountered an item with an unknown function, don't just casually bring it back to the lair. Who knows if it's a ticking time bomb? Since that was the case, no need to hesitate. Settle this quickly. Chun Mang looked out the window. The fires of war had settled. Ship debris drifted all over the universe, as majestic as a dust cloud. The units that had surrounded him were all dead. Now that they were gathered in one place, it was even easier to clean up. Well, Chun Mang thought, gathering together is good. Saves me the trouble of searching. The next moment, the ship vanished from its spot, turning into a badge pinned to Chun Mang's chest. He floated in the middle of the universe, glanced around, and then dropped straight down toward the refrigerator below. He pushed the door open and stepped in, then pushed the door open and stepped out again. He was now standing on a planet, surrounded by a massive crowd of people. Everyone was holding guns and wearing military uniforms. The pressure hit him right in the face. Quite a few warships were also hovering in the air. The person standing closest saw him and froze. When did you get in here? Chun Mang smiled faintly. The planetary train instantly stretched across the sky, as if tearing space apart. He took a step back, leaning against the refrigerator behind him to jump straight into the control room. On the roof of the train, the main A-cannon light energy cannons slowly lit up, scorching patterns running along them. An earth-shattering sound blared from the ship's speakers, blanketing the vicinity. And that message was broadcast over the radio, sweeping across the entire planet. Lay down your weapons. Surrender and join the human civilization, and you will be spared. The human civilization welcomes all human individuals to join. I do not wish to create meaningless massacres. Surrender and live. That voice echoed across the planet. The leader of the Haomiao civilization looked at the planetary train hovering in the sky, his face turning pale. Why did this ship suddenly appear here? But at this moment, everyone clearly understood one thing. Fighting was a dead end. Everyone here combined couldn't defeat the planetary train. Running wasn't an option either. The planetary train was guarding this place. The moment a wormhole opened, it would be destroyed. So there were only two paths left. The entire race surrenders, or they fight to the bitter end. There was no third option. Let's surrender. The general holding the refrigerator immediately leaned in and whispered, "We can't beat them. If we surrender, we live." The leader of the Haomiao civilization had a dark expression. He operated the radio on his ship, sending a private message to the human civilization. "Are you sure? If we surrender, you'll give us a way out?" Of course. Hearing that, the leader of the Haomiao civilization let out a breath. He obviously wouldn't believe it just based on one sentence. But the name, human civilization, itself spoke to the goal of uniting humanity. They would be more receptive to taking people in. And when another civilization truly joined, it was a joining recognized by the rules of the universe, meaning complete integration. At that point, the trust between the two sides would at least be higher than outright slaughter. A hint of mockery flashed through his eyes. As long as we live, there will be opportunities later, he thought to himself. The enemy is strong, sure, but they seem green when it comes to politics. If I join, I can gradually infiltrate, gradually scheme. Who knows, one day, I might just sit in their chair. When that happens, everything belonging to the human civilization will become mine. That outcome was even sweeter than the original plan of hiding deep in the universe. I have one condition. The leader of the Haomiao civilization sent another message. The Haomiao civilization can officially surrender. But the human civilization must create a permanent two-way wormhole connecting the Naya star system and the Haomiao star system, fully linking the two. Fine, the other side replied very quickly. Any other conditions? Good. Gather all your resources and hand them over. The leader of the Haomiao civilization nodded and gave a short reply. He waved his hand, ordering his subordinates to gather the resources on the planet to hand over. They had been preparing to flee, so they had brought everything with them. Right now, resources were piled high on the planet, all things they had intended to take away. It hurt. It really did, practically handing over their entire foundation to someone else, but there was no other way. Wars between civilizations were fundamentally about resources. They couldn't hold on to them. Might as well hand them over first. As long as they lived, they could figure things out later. He reminded himself of the old saying, as long as the Green Mountains remain, there will be firewood to burn. Very quickly, resources poured toward the planetary train like a tidal wave. Tens of thousands of mining robots stepped out of the ship and began collecting. It was a massive spectacle. The process lasted for 6 whole hours before everything was swept clean into the cargo hold. Just looking at the time it took was enough to know how terrifying the amount was. Chen Meng watched the resource numbers jumping continuously and couldn't help but exhale. With this much, why didn't they spend it earlier? Whatever needed upgrading, just upgrade it. Why push yourselves into this situation? He shook his head. Dying before you've spent all your money. That's the absolute worst. Captain, Xiao AI's voice rang out. They didn't have enough Murphy stone. With this many resources, they couldn't spend them even if they wanted to. Building more low-level ships is meaningless. They could only stockpile it for ammunition or wait until they gathered enough Murphy stone to upgrade their top-tier accessories. Yeah, Chen Meng nodded. Iron ore, copper ore, there's plenty of that. But the Murphy stone they handed over is pitifully low. I believe they aren't hiding it. Having Murphy stone without iron ore is useless anyway, so if they had any left, they would have used it. To put it bluntly, the Haomiao civilization's vault is truly out of Murphy's stone. With the resources fully collected, Chun Meng didn't linger. The planetary train slowly ascended, lifting out of the atmosphere and entering space. Right after, the main A-cannon light energy cannons on the roof began to charge again. A few seconds later, a blazing pillar of light pierced straight through the planet below. Just a beat later, countless dark red cracks appeared on the planet's surface like a web of patterns. Then, a silent explosion, yet one that shook the very fabric of space. Debris blasted outward, scattering all around the orbit. One shot, and the entire planet was blown to pieces. As for the Haomiao civilization's main forces assembled down there, they naturally turned to ash in that blast. A small number of ships that tried to rush out of the sea of fire were also locked onto by the planetary train and swiftly shot down. Chen Meng sat in the control room, looking at the scene before him, and chuckled softly. Not bad. He never intended to let this group live. They were a bunch of unstable elements. Letting them join and bringing them onto his ship would just be asking for trouble. The only reason he pretended to compromise for so long was simply because he discovered a massive amount of resources on this planet. He couldn't open fire. The moment he fired, that entire pile of his resources would instantly turn to ash. Once the resources were in his hands, that group naturally no longer needed to exist. The ordinary citizens on the other planets of the Haomiao civilization could live. Most of them didn't even know anything about the human civilization, just living their own lives. But these unstable elements absolutely had to die. It's fine, Chen Meng smiled faintly. I promised not to kill them, but I never said which universe I'd let them live in. Living in the second universe still counts as living, right? He knew he was being a hypocrite, but as long as he achieved his goal, it was fine. Captain, Xiao Ai's voice rang out, sounding resentful. Only intact souls have a chance of entering the second universe. And even if they are intact, it's still just a probability. With that kind of explosion, their souls definitely couldn't remain intact. It's absolutely impossible for them to enter the second universe. So they're completely dead? Completely dead. Oh well, guess I broke my promise. Chen Meng pursed his lips. Whatever, who cares? He looked around. Set off. Let's go home. 3 hours later, the planetary train completely finished the war and reappeared in the Naya star system. The time this battle took was even less than he expected. If the Haomiao civilization had scattered and fought a guerrilla war, then even though he was strong, he ultimately only had one ship. He couldn't split himself in two. To wipe out their entire armed forces, it probably would have taken at least a month or two, maybe even longer. But coincidentally, the Haomiao civilization gathered their entire armed forces, along with their foundational resources, onto a single planet, and even brought his refrigerator along. So what else was there to say? Pack it up, take it away, take it all away. Not bad at all. Chen Meng sat in the control room, smiling to himself. As he inventoried the acquired resources, the corners of his mouth kept inching upward. Sure enough, war was always the fastest way to plunder wealth. The planetary train originally only had 3 quadrillion units of iron ore left. It started at 4 quadrillion. Last time at the black hole, upgrading the SP-7 tail thruster to level 1000 drank up 1 quadrillion. Now, recovering another 9 quadrillion from the Haomiao civilization, his total iron ore reached 12 quadrillion, hitting a new peak. The other resources also increased significantly. The ship no longer had that stingy vibe from before. Now he had money. Seriously rich. Chen Meng looked at the resource board, feeling a bit emotional. What he found funny was that the Haomiao civilization had so many resources, yet they were destroyed before they even had a chance to spend them. Holding onto resources and not knowing how to use them was just a waste. He was different. He always felt like he didn't have enough. He had never once felt like he had more than he could spend. 12 quadrillion sounded terrifying, but in reality, it was only enough to upgrade 12 7-color accessories from level 500 to level 1000. And that wasn't even counting defensive accessories. Level 4 civilizations still weren't rich enough. Perhaps the ordinary, unremarkable level 5 civilization located beneath the Naya star system would give him a little surprise. He didn't need fairness. He just needed enough money. Oh, almost forgot. Back at the black hole, When he upgraded the 7-color speed accessory, he forgot to check what the level 1000 transcendent super effect was. The level 1000 transcendent super effect of the SP7 thruster, explosive speed. A simple effect. Just 2 words. Exactly like the level 500 effect. Pure stats, no flashy gimmicks. No wonder the ship's maximum speed limit shot up so terrifyingly. 360,750,400 kilometers per hour. A long string of numbers, hard to visualize. To put it more clearly, this speed had reached 1/3 the speed of light, which meant that now, the planetary train could entirely rely on its own speed to travel 1 light year. Don't think 1 light year sounds modest. Without relying on wormholes, many civilizations, let alone having a territory of 1,000,000 light years, would struggle to even step out 1 light year. Many civilizations claim to have territories spanning tens of millions of light years. It sounded impressive, but 99.99% of those areas were dead zones they had never even set foot in. I like it. Chen Meng looked at this effect and nodded in satisfaction. It didn't have any broken rule-based effects, but pure numerical value had its own kind of beauty. At this rate, when upgraded to level 2000, the speed would probably match the speed of light. The rule that objects cannot exceed the speed of light in the universe didn't seem to be an ironclad law. At least in the face of level 0 authority, it felt like there were loopholes. If level 2000 wasn't enough, then level 5000. As for the other green and yellow tail thruster accessories, after reaching level 1000, their transcendent super effects were also purely about increasing speed. Thanks to multiple layers of buffs, the ship achieved such a terrifying speed. In that case, Chen Meng looked at the detailed accessory board on the ship, his eyes narrowing slightly. At this point, the majority of the accessories had almost reached level 500 or 1000. If he wanted to get stronger, there were only 2 directions left: firepower and defense. The money was right here. The question was, where to pour it for the best return. Like some other functions, it was worth noting that Chen Meng discovered even the ship armor of a level 4 civilization was unbelievably low. Most were only level 150. At most, they were level 200, practically no different from a level 3 civilization. The reason was simple: upgrading armor to level 500 was meaningless. The opponent only needed to build a level 707 color main cannon. The cost was cheaper than upgrading armor to 500, and the effect was a direct counter. As a result, defense was seen as superfluous. In that context, all civilizations, even God-tier ones, were the high attack, low defense type, with almost no significant protective layers. They competed for exactly one thing: who strikes first. And the advantage of striking first was magnified infinitely. Chen Meng didn't like this style. It lacked any sense of security. He preferred having both high defense and high attack, so whether he struck first or second, he could remain unbothered. He didn't want to win by luck. He wanted to win with absolute certainty. Right then, Xiao Ai's voice rang out in the control room. "I have 2 pieces of good news." Chen Meng raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." He took a bowl of scallion oil noodles from Xiao Fong, who had just walked in, sat down in front of the control panel, grabbed a large chopstick full of noodles, and shoved it straight into his mouth. The aroma of scallions mixed with the smell of the noodles wafted up, smelling incredibly delicious. He lifted the bowl and took a slurp. The golden scallion oil, mixed with scallions and toasted sesame seeds, still piping hot, slid straight down into his stomach. The heat spread out, feeling so good that his stomach seemed to expand a beat. He grabbed the fried egg buried under the noodles and stuffed it into his mouth. Before the yolk could even fully burst, he hurriedly grabbed another chopstick full of noodles, chewing ravenously in pure bliss. Finally, he took a sip of the broth. Absolute comfort. Chen Meng loved the scallion oil noodles Xiao Fong cooked. He never got tired of them. No matter how he ate them, they were always delicious, fragrant, and refreshing. Xiao Ai was about to continue, but seeing that scene, she paused for a beat and blurted out, "Ship AI assistants don't have desires. But watching you eat, for the first time, it sparked a desire in me to eat. Is eating really that great? What does it feel like? My database can accurately describe the taste of countless dishes, but I've never been able to feel that sensation of scallion oil exploding on the taste buds. It's amazing. Chen Meng polished off the bowl of noodles, not even leaving a drop of broth. He leaned back in his chair, lit a cigarette, and smiled. Whenever you get the chance to feel it, try it yourself. Now back to business. What's the good news? Two pieces of good news. First, Xiao AI said, I've absorbed a massive amount of information from the Haomiao Civilization's AI database and obtained quite a few things. Among them is information about the ordinary, unremarkable Level 5 civilization located below the x-axis of the Naya star system. I think you'll really like it, Captain. The second piece of news. During the few hours the ship was trapped in the black hole, 7 years passed in the outside world. Before that, Chikishio, the guy at the ship armor R&D center in Car 2, moved his team to the research base on the aqua blue planet. This led to Xiao AI paused slightly. Chikishio and his team focusing on research for 7 whole years. They've researched a large number of original accessories. 9 accessories in total, including the refrigerator, the moldy bread production line, and the telescope. Aside from the originals reverse-engineered from existing accessories, there's also a completely new accessory. We've never seen it appear on any ship of the civilizations we've encountered. It's a white-tier accessory called the trash can. Just as the name suggests, it's for holding trash. A small one, placed in the bathroom or bedroom. And it's not a production line. It has to be crafted individually, costing 100 units of iron ore each. Oh, a flash of surprise crossed Chen Meng's eyes. This really is an unexpected joy. Now he could re-roll the transcendent super effects of many accessories on the ship. And these were all originals. Original accessories belonging to the human civilization. Once a transcendent super effect was re-rolled and locked in, he could mass-produce the corresponding blueprints. It was just that. He found the trash can sounding really funny. But funny didn't mean useless. Chen Meng asked, There's one thing I'm a bit curious about. Help me ask Chikishio, what exactly is the point of this original trash can accessory he researched? Xiao AI answered immediately. He already explained that. He mainly wanted to research an accessory that had never appeared before, or one with a very low usage rate. Even if the civilizations we've met so far don't have it, the universe is too vast. Who knows, maybe some civilization out there already owns this blueprint. Chikishio's idea is that, since the ship has the ability to re-roll transcendent super effects almost infinitely, the rarer the accessory, the higher the probability of rolling a universe-unique transcendent super effect. No matter how trash the accessory is, a universe-unique effect won't be bad. This idea is interesting. Chen Meng leaned back, waving away the smoke drifting in front of him, nodding in deep thought. He understood immediately. Aim for the rare stuff, not the common stuff. Like the refrigerator. If he wanted to roll a universe-unique transcendent super effect from that, the probability was extremely low, almost zero. Because almost every civilization had a refrigerator, the unique effect related to it had probably been snatched up by some civilization a long time ago. But for accessories that few civilizations owned, like the trash can, the chance of re-rolling to get a universe-unique transcendent super effect was massive. This line of thinking was correct. Not bad. Tell Chikishio over there to keep up the good work. If he can, try to research some high-tier accessories, like 7-color ones. White-tier accessories are hard to turn the tide with. Understood. Recovering the entire research institute of the Haomiao civilization, this time, will also help him a lot. Chen Meng nodded, saying no more, just looking at the 9 original accessories placed on the control panel. The first one he noticed was the original refrigerator. This accessory had saved him quite a few times in the early stages, bringing all sorts of benefits to the ship. The level 200 transcendent super effect even helped him travel more freely through the universe. The only pity was that the previous level 500 effect turned out to be nothingness. Now, he could finally re-roll the transcendent super effect. Initially, he could only deduce accessories up to level 200. Anything beyond that was a blind spot. But ever since he upgraded Xiao AI to level 500 and received the level 500 transcendent super effect for the ship AI assistant, everything had changed. The level 500 transcendent super effect of the ship AI assistant, computing power significantly increased. The deduction level for transcendent super effects of original accessories is raised to level 500. Simultaneously inherits the AI data of all deceased AIs within radar range over the past 10 years. Currently, he could deduce up to level 500. But Chen Meng was a bit greedy. He wanted to deduce up to level 1000. That way, he could see the overall potential of an accessory much more clearly. The only thing was, this was almost exclusively for his own use. It would definitely be hard to sell later. For example, if he had an original accessory and re-rolled a universe-unique effect at level 200, the copied blueprints would sell for an exorbitant price. People would fight to buy them. But if that unique effect only appeared at level 1000, the blueprint would be practically priceless but unmarketable. No one could afford to buy it. A unique effect appearing at level 1000, whether in efficacy or potential, would definitely be stronger than at level 200. That went without saying. The problem was, people could grit their teeth and upgrade to level 200, but for level 1000, many couldn't even dream of it in their entire lifetimes. No matter how top-tier an item was, if it couldn't be used, it was just a display piece. No one wanted to hold on to something just to look at it. Without hesitation, Chen Meng withdrew 100 trillion units of iron ore, upgrading the ship AI assistant straight to level 1000, and received a brand new Transcendent Super Effect. The level 1000 Transcendent Super Effect of the ship AI assistant, computing power massively increased. The deduction level for Transcendent Super Effects of original accessories is raised to level 1000, and can deduce heavenly secrets. Luck isn't bad. Just raising the deduction level to 1000 was worth the money. It was just that phrase, deduce heavenly secrets, at the end. He didn't quite understand what it meant specifically. It sounded like he was about to become colleagues with fortune tellers. He'd ask Xiao AI later to see if her system had actually changed. Right after, he didn't delay, immediately beginning to deduce the original refrigerator. After setting up the process, he was about to stand up and do something else, since this would require tens of thousands of simulations. However, just as he stood up, Xiao AI's voice rang out in the control room. Captain, the refrigerator just randomly received a universe-unique Transcendent Super Effect. On the very first reroll, a hole-in-one. Chen Meng froze, then plopped back down, his eyes glued to the control panel displayed on the operation screen. You've got to be kidding me. I mentally prepared myself for tens of thousands of tries, and it hits on the first shot? Simulation 1 complete. The super effects bestowed by the universe this time are as follows. Level 5 Super Effect of the refrigerator, Optimal Preservation. Any food placed in this refrigerator will be perfectly preserved. When taken out, its taste and quality will remain almost unchanged. Level 10 Super Effect of the refrigerator can convert monster flesh and blood into a small amount of iron ore. Level 20 Super Effect of the refrigerator, Universe Within. The internal space is expanded. Level 50 Super Effect of the refrigerator, placing low-intelligence creatures like starry sky behemoths inside the refrigerator to nurture can slightly increase their growth rate. Level 100 Super Effect of the refrigerator requires no power supply, can remain in standby mode permanently. Level 200 Super Effect of the refrigerator receives random resources daily, ranging from 1 unit of iron ore to 100 billion units of iron ore. Completely random. Level 500 Super Effect of the refrigerator. The refrigerator can self-destruct without consuming resources. Automatically charges energy. The longer it charges, the greater the power. Maximum power equals a full force strike from a level 1000 7-color firepower accessory. Level 1000 Super Effect of the refrigerator can absorb all cosmic contraband scattered throughout the universe. The quantity and timing of acquisition are indeterminate. Do you want to save or reroll? Chen Meng stared blankly at the control panel on the screen. He remained silent for a long time, his expression very hard to describe. So this level 1000 super effect was actually the super effect from the future. Actually, a mischievous thought suddenly popped into his head. If I choose not to save right now, what will happen? Will the future change? It definitely would. But the refrigerator that already existed wouldn't change. As long as this unique super effect hadn't been snatched by another civilization, that refrigerator sitting in the Nanmei civilization would be the only one in the universe possessing this effect. The very next moment, save. Of course, he wouldn't actually pull a stunt like that. Just like anyone standing on a rooftop has a fleeting thought of jumping off, but hardly anyone actually does it. A thought is one thing. Responsibility is another. The result wasn't bad, especially the level 500 super effect. It was actually pretty sweet. To reach maximum power, it needed to charge for 1,000 years. It sounded far-fetched, but he just needed to throw it into a time rift and then have Daba pull it out. Throwing it into a black hole would work too, but that was a bit of a waste and hard to retrieve. Used reasonably, this was a good attack method. Unconventional, but effective. A strong strike didn't necessarily mean the right strike. Like the Haomiao civilization. They also had strong attacks, having fired a few shots into the cosmic vault, but the consumption was too terrifying to actually use. So what was the point of being strong? Only a usable method is a good method. After that, Chen Mang didn't stop. He initiated a rescreening of all the remaining accessory blueprints before getting up to leave the cabin. He'd been way too busy lately. Time for a day off. The development speed of human civilization was skyrocketing, especially after wiping out the Haomiao and GE civilizations. The massive amount of resources obtained not only covered all war losses, but left a mountain of surplus. That pile of resources pushed human civilization's power to a whole new level. Like a snowball, rolling bigger and faster. Currently, human civilization was already at level 5, and level 6 wasn't far off. On the stellar cruiser, in cabin 5 reserved for top-tier talents, Chen Mang sat on Ren Yao's bed, watching Ji Chuchu massage his legs at the foot of the bed. He thought silently. The biggest hurdle to advancing to a level 6 civilization was upgrading the Akana main energy cannon to level 2000. Before heading to the mediocre civilization, he needed to upgrade the main cannon to 2000 first. After all, that was the thing that wiped out the Naya civilization. It couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, it did so by erasing the universe. He was also a level 5 civilization now, but he didn't have any universe erasing methods yet. Is this really something a level 5 civilization can possess? If so, then I definitely can't walk into that game empty-handed. In the universe, the biggest flaw, and simultaneously the biggest temptation, is latency. You fire a main cannon deep into space, and you have to wait a long time to see the explosions flash. You send a message to a friend tens of millions of light years away, and it has to relay through countless stations, taking ages to arrive. You look deep into the universe with your naked eye, and what you're actually seeing is light emitted a long time ago. In the universe, no one can see the present with their naked eye. Everyone is looking at the past. That's exactly why, over 100,000 light years away from the Naya star system, in a remote location belonging to no star system, a void behemoth was floating. On the surface of its skin, a small wormhole suddenly appeared, and two men in business suits stepped out. The space around the void behemoth was constantly tearing apart, but the two men stood firmly on its surface, as if completely unaffected. This was an extremely harsh environment. Normally, even powerhouses from cultivation civilizations would struggle to survive here. Let me see. A young man looked at the tablet in his hand and muttered, "The system shows that 7 years ago, a space mine was shot down in this area. Probably some civilization blew up again. Per standard protocol, the system set the space mine to only attack places with a radar range of 100,000 light years. That's a sign of a level 3 civilization. It wouldn't go messing with a level 4 civilization. And if it's a level 3 civilization, it shouldn't have the means to shoot down a space mine." All right. The young man glanced at the completed progress bar on the tablet, then pressed the Explore button in the corner. A virtual radar popped up, starting to scan all civilizations within 1,000,000 light years. The process was quite slow, taking a few minutes. As for the progress bar that just finished, it was the flight log he received right before the space mine was destroyed. "Everything's fine," he continued, his eyes glued to the screen. The flight log shows. Space mine number 3 had an internal black hole integrity of 96%. The energy transmission device was functioning normally. Everything was in perfect condition. After being detected by radar, it attacked the target. Yet it was still shot down. That means there's something abnormal here. Up until now, everything is normal. The young man quickly scrolled through the info on the tablet and muttered, "What was that civilization called again? Human civilization. He smirked. What an arrogant name. Then, he froze, staring blankly at the history log, and fell silent. His lips parted, but no words came out. What's wrong? The middle-aged man next to him walked over wearily. His old buddy had retired, and he was sick and tired of this job too. It had lost all its novelty a long time ago. He just wanted to retire early too, but the moment he saw the history log on the tablet, he also froze. Space Mine number 3 was swallowed by a void behemoth. In one gulp, he let out a curse. Then his eyes widened. The diameter of Space Mine number 3 was nearly 2 light years. What kind of void behemoth has a mouth big enough to swallow that? Did it chew it like a Mentos? The two looked at each other, faces full of shock and disbelief. But the history log described it exactly like that. The middle-aged man swallowed hard, stayed silent for a long time, then said hoarsely, "This void behemoth most likely doesn't belong to that level 3 human civilization. A level 3 civilization couldn't possibly tame something of this caliber." He continued, his voice heavier. To raise one to this level, the resources consumed would be an astronomical figure. Even draining a top-tier, ancient level 3 civilization dry wouldn't be enough. He concluded, Space Mine number 3 probably wasn't shot down by that civilization. It just unluckily bumped into a sleeping void behemoth wandering through space. It woke up cranky and swallowed it whole. "Is that really it?" the young man said, his voice cracking. Right at that moment, the radar on the tablet finished scanning. On the screen were rows of glowing dots representing civilizations within 1,000,000 light years. He pointed at the largest, brightest dot, his expression complex. This is human civilization. Currently, it's already a level 5 civilization. 7 years. It's only been 7 years. A level 3 civilization jumping to level 5. This speed. Have you ever seen anything like it? The middle-aged man fell silent. A sudden chill ran through his heart. He had a premonition that war was about to break out. Their civilization was a level 6 civilization, with a territory spanning 32 million light years and 7 star systems. This area was within their territory. They couldn't let a newly risen level 5 civilization sprout right in their backyard. Unless that civilization submitted, just like the mediocre civilization. Otherwise, the flames of war would definitely ignite. It's just that their side seemed a bit slow to react. "Let's go back," the middle-aged man said in a deep voice. "Back to headquarters to report. This kind of explosively growing civilization needs to be dealt with as soon as possible. If we let them reach level 6, things will get much harder." He looked straight at the young man. "They must be destroyed immediately, or there will be endless trouble." The young man didn't argue, just nodded. The two returned to the wormhole and disappeared from the void behemoth's back. This matter was too big. It had to be reported immediately. At the same time, on the stellar cruiser, Chen Meng was estimating the cost of creating a wormhole across the cosmic ring to reach the Nanmei civilization. Before going to war with the mediocre civilization, he planned to take a trip to Nanmei to take back what was his, Tiangong, and the mysterious safe inside Tiangong. According to Xiao Pang, the Nanmei civilization had discovered a safe in Tiangong. It definitely contained something, and it was very likely what he needed. Since it was his, he'd have to take it back sooner or later. The only difference was how. He didn't hesitate. Opening a wormhole to a location 1,000,000 light years away required 150 trillion units of iron ore. If the cosmic ring was only 10 million light years wide, then about 1.5 quadrillion would be enough. This was a one-way, single-use wormhole. Usually, no civilization would do this when exploring the map. What's the point of opening a path with no return, other than waiting to die? But he had the fridge, so he didn't care much about it being one way. The next moment, 150 trillion units of iron ore turned to dust. A wormhole slowly opened, and the stellar cruiser charged in. When it appeared on the other side, the ship had advanced 1,000,000 light years deep into the cosmic ring. This repeated until the 10th time. After burning through 1.5 quadrillion units of iron ore, the edge of the cosmic ring was still nowhere in sight. By then, the stellar cruiser had advanced 10 million light years, far away from the Naya star system. There were no stars around, no dust clouds, just emptiness and cold. This was the cosmic vault, the Sahara Desert of the universe. At a glance, There was nothing. Finally, on the 20th jump, Chunmeng saw the edge of the cosmic ring on the Doppler radar and also saw the Nanmei civilization appear on the radar. His current position was only 13 light-years away from the edge of the cosmic ring. He opened another short wormhole. Stepping out, he had arrived at the northern border of the Nanmei civilization, which was also their bustling hub. This was the Nanmei civilization, separated from him by an entire cosmic ring. And he had also measured the diameter of this cosmic ring, almost exactly 20 million light-years. The total cost for this wormhole journey was 3 quadrillion units of iron ore. But in exchange, he arrived instantly. And he didn't plan on leaving empty-handed. Damn, that's expensive. Chunmeng calculated in his head, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. This cost almost caught up to the majority of the accumulated resources of a level 4 civilization. Even a war he started might not cost this much. But in exchange for striking straight into the enemy's heart, he had to bite the bullet. Looks like they haven't detected me. Chunmeng looked at the Doppler radar, his eyes darkening. A wormhole suddenly appearing inside a civilization was extremely conspicuous. At this moment, nearby fleets on the radar were rushing over to investigate. But even as the fleet swarmed in, no one spotted him. No target locks, no warnings, no hails. The level 500 radar shielding device really did its job. He didn't stop. He looked at the coordinates Xiaopeng gave him. A planet, which was also Xiaopeng's home. Coincidentally, it was quite close, only 1,298 light-years away. There were many permanent wormholes set up by the Nanmei civilization nearby. This was the true look of a level 5 civilization, a network of permanent wormholes connecting planets within its territory, maintaining trade, communication, border defense deployment, and resource transportation. This kind of infrastructure burned resources like burning paper. His human civilization, on the other hand, was the opposite. There wasn't a single permanent wormhole built by him in his territory. This kind of development was a bit extreme. Communication or no communication, he didn't care. If he had resources, he dumped them all into upgrading the ship. Building the civilization could wait. Upgrade the ship first. Only when the ship is strong do you have everything. If the ship isn't strong enough, no matter how beautiful the interior is, it's just a toy for a higher civilization, erased at will. He didn't like building castles on sand. It's just that. He couldn't use this wormhole network recklessly. To use it, he needed a legal identity in the Nanmei civilization and had to pay the corresponding digital currency. Chunmeng steered the ship toward the nearest wormhole. Soon, a control panel popped up on the operation screen. External network detected. Requesting connection to the ship. Do you agree/disagree? 7 hours later, Chunmeng drove the ship to the nearest wormhole, a wormhole suspended in the sky above a planet. Outside were several space stations, floating orbital weapons, and inspectors at the entrance. Many ships were lining up to enter one by one. He also queued his ship up. When it was his turn, a robotic arm at the entrance held a giant scanner and swept it across the top of the ship. On the large screen next to it, the words appeared. Authentication successful. Permission to pass granted. Huh. Chunmeng chuckled softly. Before coming, he had communicated with Xiaopeng. Xiaopeng's father had semi-retired, and Xiaopeng had begun taking over his father's commercial empire and network. He asked Xiaopeng to get him a legal identity in the Nanmei civilization. This was no simple task. Nanmei had an internal network recording the data of every ship in the civilization. Only authenticated ships could pass. This was a security issue. If ships from other civilizations snuck in and used the internal wormholes, the disaster would be catastrophic. Yet Xiaopeng still managed to stuff his ship's info into the internal network. It was practically a godlike maneuver. This network was highly likely controlled by an extremely powerful AI, and AI doesn't take bribes. So how did Xiaopeng manage to bypass or convince the AI? It couldn't have been easy. He'd ask when they met. He'd remember this favor. After that, Chunmeng drove the ship like a traveler returning home. Passing through several wormholes in a row, the ship finally stopped above a blue planet, temporarily concluding the journey across 20 million light-years. He had truly stepped into the interior of the civilization. Driving out of the spaceport, the stellar cruiser sped along the designated ship route, rushing toward Xiaopeng's house. Meanwhile, he looked up at Tiangong, still hovering in the planet's sky. It didn't seem to have changed position, as if it had become a satellite of this planet, rotating with it. It didn't affect the light, only the temperature a little, but not significantly. The Nanmei civilization had its own ways of dealing with these minor issues. Finally, when the ship slowly stopped in front of a rather ordinary-looking civilian house, Chen Meng led Biaozi and the others down. He saw Xiao Pang and his father waiting at the door and smiled, nodding. "Long time no see, Brother Meng," Xiao Pang called out tentatively. Receiving a confirming look, he couldn't help but grin widely and stepped forward. "Finally get to meet you in person. If you hadn't forbidden me from picking you up, I was going to use the highest reception protocol for you." Chen Meng looked at Xiao Pang in front of him and also laughed. He had met him many times through the cyber mine, but this was the first time in real life. 7 years had passed, and Xiao Pang looked completely different. He wasn't even fat anymore. You could see the traces of training. He went from pure obesity to muscle covered in a layer of fat. Initially, Chen Meng approached him just to dig up info on the Nanmei civilization. But after interacting for so long, a bit of camaraderie had blossomed between them. Someone useful who keeps their word is worth keeping around. Right then, the middle-aged man standing next to Xiao Pang appeared extremely cautious. He asked hoarsely, very hesitantly, "Are you the owner of that thing?" Xiao Pang looked quite relaxed because of their friendship, but his father was different. He had witnessed with his own eyes a bizarre phenomenon that had enveloped the entire Nanmei civilization, which was then resolved from afar by the young man in front of him. He still remembered it vividly to this day. That day, suddenly everyone in the Nanmei civilization simultaneously looked up at a certain spot in the universe, while daily life went on normally. The scene was both bizarre and chilling, as if the gates of hell had opened and something was spilling out. It was the young man in front of him who handled that incident. To this day, no one in the Nanmei civilization knew this had ever happened. No one knew their civilization had brushed past a terrifying disaster. This was even more terrifying than memory erasure. It altered perception itself without leaving a trace. Only a few people in the entire civilization, like him, knew. And after it was over, that young man left him a few words. "I've helped you take care of it. Go back. Keep that fridge safe. Don't lose it. It doesn't belong to you. In a few days, its owner will come to take it back. Don't worry, he won't harm you. Your life truly begins from this moment. The goddess of fate has retracted the price. From now on, there is only unconditional giving." From then on, he never touched the fridge that had been taken off his desk. He sealed it in a massive vault and announced his semi-retirement, practically withdrawing from the limelight, quietly helping his son take over the business. People in the family knew the family's business. He knew very well that his achievements today were largely due to that fridge. So its owner must be an extremely terrifying existence. Especially since, right before this young man arrived, he had just received intelligence. The federal government had discovered a wormhole suddenly appearing within the civilization. The other end was deep in the void, and the civilization mark imprinted in the wormhole belonged to a level 5 civilization, human civilization. Currently, the federal government was holding an emergency meeting, going all out to detect if anything had come out of the wormhole. They suspected a civilization on the other side of the void had crossed that entire expanse and entered here. Combined with Chen Meng's sudden appearance, anyone with a brain could guess the answer. Facing such an existence, it was one thing if you didn't know, but knowing it, it was truly hard to maintain a normal attitude like his son. "It's me." Chen Meng smiled at Xiao Pang's father. "But if you want to keep it, that's fine too. No worries. It's just a little toy." He raised his eyes, his voice still calm. "I just need to take my Tiangong away. My Tiangong was lured here by that little toy." At this, Xiao Pang got a bit excited. "Brother Meng, how about we head upstairs first? I've prepared a banquet up there." Chen Meng nodded. Hearing the answer, Xiao Pang's father showed a hint of relief. The thing he considered his most precious treasure for years, which he hadn't even told his son about, treating it as his biggest secret, turned out to be just a toy someone casually made. He originally thought the thing Chen Meng wanted back was the fridge. Who knew it was Tiangong? And the owner of Tiangong was Chen Meng himself. Thinking of this, he remembered the other lines inside Tiangong. "Time submits here. Space bends here. Karma is written here. Fate is decided here. Past and future converge at this moment. All things will return to silence. Only this palace is eternal. His expression gradually became complex. If those lines were all about Chen Mang, then Chen Mang was even more terrifying than he imagined. He might come from a high-level civilization, perhaps even a divine-level civilization. After the banquet, Chen Mang told Xiao Pang to give them some space. He looked at the middle-aged man sitting opposite him, who was a bit panicked, and said lightly, "Relax. Take me to see the fridge." "Yes." The middle-aged man took a deep breath, slowly stood up, and led Chen Mang and a few of Biaozi's men from the living room to the study. He pressed a mechanism on the bookshelf. The floor opened, revealing a path down into a pitch-black tunnel. The whole house looked like a civilian house from the outside, and it was a civilian house. Nothing luxurious, everything as ordinary as could be. If there was anything unusual, it was that there were no outsiders in this house. The entire building belonged to Xiao Pang's family. "Brother Mang, please." Chen Mang followed the middle-aged man into the tunnel, stepped onto a conveyor belt, and slid quickly into the depths. The tunnel walls showed clear signs of construction. The tunnel was lined with thick steel plates. The defense wasn't bad. Even a bomb exploding on the surface would struggle to collapse it. Of course, that was speaking of small-scale ground warfare. If a civilization war truly broke out, one shot from an Arcana main energy cannon would blow up the planet, rendering these steel plates meaningless. Pretty simple setup, huh? Chen Mang looked around, lit a cigarette, leaned against the conveyor belt railing, and chuckled. "Eating well, making so much money, yet your house is this modest. Don't you enjoy life a little?" This guy was so scared of him he was shrinking, yet he lived like he was in hiding. Makes sense. Pitiful. "There's nothing worth enjoying," the middle-aged man said softly. "As long as my wife and kids live well, that's enough. Material life has its limits, no matter how rich you are. 100 billion or 2 trillion, it's all the same. The experience doesn't differ much." He shrugged. "Even if it's more expensive, it's still just that. Spiritual wealth is true wealth, and that has no ceiling. Besides," he hesitated for a beat, then continued, "the wealth I've earned these past few years is all thanks to Brother Mang's little toy. Since that conversation, I've thought it through. This wealth never belonged to me. I was just holding on to it. I've converted it all into physical resources and stored them with the fridge in the cold storage. Now it's time to return the item to its rightful owner." Chen Mang frowned and raised a hand to stop him. "I came here this time for one purpose only, to see Xiao Pang and take back my Tiangong. I didn't come here to rob your house." He glanced at him, his voice still calm. "Maybe you think I'm too petty. I've been out plundering civilizations these past few years. Since when is a merchant worth me lifting a finger? Your wealth isn't even enough to cover my travel expenses here." He paused, then said slowly, "I know you're very rich and have accumulated a lot. But just leave it for your son. Forget it, let's not talk about it anymore." Having said that, changing his tune now would be losing face. The middle-aged man hesitated, as if wanting to say more, thought for a moment, then swallowed his words. The conveyor belt happened to stop. He stepped off first and walked to a massive vault door embedded in the wall. He placed his finger on the sensor panel. A blue light flashed, the sound of gears turning echoed. "It's right in here." The door slowly opened. Before their eyes was a sea of iron ore, almost endless, filling the entire warehouse, with no end in sight. Chen Mang had just stepped off the conveyor belt and froze. He tried to keep his face calm, but the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. The warehouse was about 10 meters high, and the iron ore was piled up to nearly 7 meters. It was as majestic as a cargo transit hub. Most importantly, every block was level 10 iron ore. One level 10 block equaled 1 billion units of iron ore. 1,000 blocks was a trillion. To put it bluntly, even if this warehouse was only 3 meters deep, the amount of iron ore here would be around 8 to 9 quadrillion units. And clearly, this place was much deeper than 3 meters. Chen Mang was speechless. He tilted his head to look at Xiao Pang's father, momentarily at a loss for words. The wealth he plundered from the GE civilization and the Haomiao civilization combined might not even equal this place. What kind of merchant is this? Being this rich makes you wealthier than an entire civilization. He suddenly felt a bit of regret for speaking so absolutely just now. But words spoken are like spilled water. No matter how much it was, he couldn't just backpedal on the spot. After a long silence, he lowered his head, lit a cigarette, and muttered, "Not bad." Xiao Pang's father said awkwardly, "The Nanmei civilization forbids private individuals from building high-level ships. The management of wood and stone is also extremely strict. I have nowhere to spend these resources. My assets over the years have basically all been poured in here." He took a breath. "It's almost all here. If possible," he said slowly, "I want to treat this as a dowry for Brother Mang. Is that okay?" "A dowry?" Qin Mang stiffened, his eye twitching. This shock was even stronger than the mountain of resources. Xiao Pang, is a girl dressed as a boy? Then he paused. It seemed he had never actually seen or verified that part of the kid. But they were just friends. Who has the time to check those things? No, no. Xiao Pang's father quickly shook his head. "No, my son is a proper man. A few years ago, my wife and I had another child. A daughter. Born beautiful. I thought maybe." "How old?" 3 years old. Jesus. Qin Mang was speechless. "She's only 3 and you're already matchmaking her. You can raise her as a child bride. No need." Qin Mang shook his head immediately. "I don't like forced, binding marriages. Let's drop it. Where's the fridge?" "In the deepest part of the cold storage." "Let's go see." "Yes." "Phew. Touch it and you're stuck." He didn't want to get stuck. Right after, Qin Mang watched helplessly as countless robotic arms descended from the warehouse ceiling, grabbing chunks of iron ore and feeding them into an opening at the entrance. The iron ore slid down a pipe into a bag at the bottom. The bag was tiny, but the space inside was unexpectedly massive, as if it would never fill up. The sight was extremely captivating. After watching for a while, Qin Mang even felt a bit intoxicated. His gaze gradually blurred. This was the true feeling of money flowing like water. But it wasn't his money. Damn it. At the same time, under someone's calculation, the screen outside the warehouse continuously displayed the real-time amount of resources leaving the inventory. Xiao Pang's father seemed to do it on purpose. He didn't open a simple path, but had the robotic arms gather all the resources in the warehouse and stuff them into the spatial bag. Finally, the outbound data stopped at an absolutely terrifying number. 29,800 quadrillion units of iron ore, 2,690 quadrillion units of copper ore, 980 quadrillion units of titanium crystal ore. Qin Mang took a deep breath and lit a cigarette. The warehouse was full of level 10 ore, not a single level 9 block in sight. This couldn't possibly be a trivial matter. He destroyed the GE civilization and obtained 7.892 quadrillion units of iron ore. He destroyed the Haomiao civilization and obtained 9 quadrillion units of iron ore. It might not sound like much, but that was the accumulated resources of the 2 strongest civilizations in the 2 largest galaxies, spanning millions of light years. Frankly speaking, this pile could be considered the accumulated wealth of an entire million light-year region over the recent period. A total of 16.892 quadrillion units of iron ore. That was basically his entire haul during this time. Yet right now, the iron ore in this warehouse was nearly 30 quadrillion, almost double those 2 civilizations combined. This wasn't just filthy rich anymore. Qin Mang finally couldn't maintain his calm facade. This temptation was hard for anyone to resist, himself included, especially when the other party was actively offering it right to his doorstep. Stay calm. The sweeter the deal, the more likely it's a trap. But what if it isn't? A man can stay responsible in a relationship, can refrain from actively flirting, can reject ambiguous signals throughout a marriage. That's what he should do. But if a perfect 10 beauty aggressively throws herself at him, and even guarantees no strings attached, and promises not to interfere with his normal life, most guys would run even faster, because 9 times out of 10, it's a honey trap. The analogy wasn't perfect, but the general idea was there. Finally, after all the resources were moved out, Xiao Pang's father stepped into the warehouse and pointed at the refrigerator placed right in the center. "It's here." Qin Mang snapped out of it and walked in too, smelling the lingering scent of iron ore in the air, a scent so addictive it was maddening. He saw the refrigerator sitting alone in the corner. The shape was all too familiar. It was indeed his refrigerator. It was built by him later on, with superior effects. It wasn't an original component blueprint from a mechanical civilization, but one independently researched and developed by human civilization. Chen Meng pulled the refrigerator door open. A few random items were still stuck to the door. Xiao Pang's father stepped forward, introducing it while looking inside. These are probably some cosmic taboo items the refrigerator collected over the past few days. Since my conversation with you, I've never opened it again. But very quickly, his body stiffened in sheer disbelief. He just stared inside, unable to utter a single word. Inside the refrigerator right now lay an old man, and his face looked exactly like Xiao Pang's father. Inside the refrigerator, there were also some scattered clothes, and the floor was littered with leftover food. Right after, the old man lying in the refrigerator saw Xiao Pang's father, then saw Chen Meng and the others behind him. His eyes flashed with a mix of relief and excitement. He was just about to say something when suddenly, his eyes flared with absolute terror. He only had time to bite down hard, snap off one of his teeth, and throw it out of the refrigerator. The very next moment, the old man inside the refrigerator exploded entirely, turning into a mist of blood and bone. At the same time, Xiao Pang's father, who was standing right at the refrigerator door, also exploded, dying on the spot with eyes full of terror and confusion. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, leaving no time to react. When the dust settled, a faint stench of blood hung in the air, and the ground was covered in minced flesh. Dead to the point where even the medical cabin couldn't save him. What the hell happened? Chen Meng darted his eyes around, touching the pin on his chest, his face gradually darkening. Xiao AI reported that the radar didn't detect any entities attacking nearby, nor could it trace any source of energy fluctuation. He didn't know who killed Xiao Pang's father, nor did he know why another Xiao Pang's father had appeared inside the freezer. But right now, he knew one thing for sure. Even with 100 mouths, he couldn't explain this. If Xiao Pang heard the news, what would he think? Anyone would suspect I killed him for his wealth. How am I supposed to explain this when I go back? If I say it wasn't me, will Xiao Pang believe it? Chen Meng looked at the tooth that had just been thrown out, bent down to pick it up, and crushed it. A tiny microchip fell out. He gritted his teeth, activated the pin on his chest, and summoned the Hongxing Hao. He tossed the chip to Xiao AI the moment he stepped out of the cabin. Decrypt the information on this chip. He paused for a beat, then continued, his voice heavy. If Xiao Pang tries to come down, stop him. I haven't figured out how to tell him about this yet. After saying that, he took a deep breath, rubbed his temples, and looked at the spatial bag lying solitary on the side. That bag contained a massive amount of resources. He planned to hand it back to Xiao Pang later, then explain exactly what happened here. What worried him most was that Xiao Pang's father might have actually been murdered by him. But not the present him, the future him. If that's true, I'm walking right into my own trap. But Chen Meng still felt it was strange. No matter how crazy he might get in the future, he didn't think he'd use a friend's family member as a backup plan like that. It didn't fit. It was too dirty. He wouldn't stoop that low. Very quickly, Xiao AI finished decrypting. Chen Meng stood rooted to the spot, looking at the information on the screen, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter. Things were getting more and more bizarre. If Xiao Pang heard this, could he really handle it? How do I say this so he doesn't explode? Inside the chip were last words that had been prepared a long time ago. And the old man in the freezer, the one who looked exactly like Xiao Pang's father, wasn't a twin brother. It was Xiao Pang's father, from the future. Just a few sentences, not long, but the amount of information was suffocatingly heavy. Brother Meng, if you're reading this, I hope you're doing well. I am Xiao Pang's father. Cosmic taboo items are products that fall into time rifts. They exist simultaneously in two states, present and past. There comes a point when these two states will appear at the same time in the same space-time. And if, at that exact moment, the two objects meet, they will explode. The power of the explosion is primarily determined by volume. Secondarily, it's slightly affected by the length of time crossed. If it's a small object, the two states meeting will only create a weak explosion. But if it's a massive object, the explosion will be terrifying. Only then did I understand why you threw Tiangong into the time rift. But I searched my whole life and couldn't find a time rift that big. After you came to the Nanmei civilization, that was the first time I met you. I tried my best to persuade you to accept the resources, but in the end, you still refused. Since you left that time, I never saw you again, and I lost contact with you. It's just that 137 years after you left, the Nanmei civilization was destroyed. A level 7 civilization struck like lightning, suppressing and slaughtering the Nanmei civilization that had just advanced to level 6. If Nanmei hadn't advanced to level 6, maybe this wouldn't have happened. The federal government was very careful, but still failed to detect that the Nanmei civilization was located right inside the territory of a level 7 civilization. Before I died, I truly regretted it. If I had been a bit braver back then, a bit more thick-skinned, and forced you to take those resources, maybe Nanmei would have been protected by you. Maybe my son wouldn't have died. My son died on the battlefield. I wasn't willing to just wait for death. After you left, I always studied cosmic taboo items. There was a breakthrough in one project. I found a way to turn a human into a cosmic taboo item. That way, I could converse with my past self. Consider it a regret medicine. On the verge of death, I modified myself into a cosmic taboo item and actively jumped into a suitable time rift. I hoped the fridge you gave me would contain me. The probability was extremely slim. The universe births countless cosmic taboo items every day. I couldn't be sure I'd be contained by that fridge. But this was my only way. I didn't know what the result would be. I only hoped that if I truly returned to the past, please, you must accept those resources. If possible, I beg you, within your power, protect the Nanmei civilization. Nanmei has many flaws, but I love my civilization. I can't bear to watch it be destroyed. Please. That was all. Shen-Meng looked at the tablet in his hand, his expression complex, standing in silence for a long time. Now he understood where that explosion just now came from, and why it was so sudden with no attack source on the radar. There was no enemy. This was the inevitable explosion when the present state and past state of a cosmic taboo item met. Xiaopeng's father used this exact method to send information from the future back to the past. Actually, just throwing the chip into the time rift would have achieved a similar effect. Perhaps before he died, he thought, since he was going to die anyway, he might as well go all out. But he didn't expect that his present self would die whether he jumped or not. But his past self originally could have lived another 137 years. Shen-Meng looked at the spatial bag placed under the robotic arm. Inside was a massive amount of resources, the total far exceeding the GE civilization and Haomiao civilization combined. This was all the wealth Xiaopeng's father had accumulated over the years. And now it was left to him. To accept or not to accept, it was no longer a matter of greed. This was human lives. It was an entire civilization. After a long time, he sighed softly. Everything was clear, but it still felt like the plot development was too abstract. Moreover, since he came back, why didn't he bring any other news? At least let him know what would happen in the future. But thinking about it, in the future, he hadn't contacted the Nanmei civilization for 137 years. He couldn't possibly bring back any news about him. However, Shen-Meng suddenly realized a crucial point, his brows instantly furrowing tightly. He turned to look at Lao Zhu beside him. Lao Zhu, if during those 137 years, our human civilization developed normally, we wouldn't need to be famous across the universe, but we should at least have a reputation in this region, right? So why? Was there absolutely no news? Or did something happen that I don't know about? The Nanmei civilization didn't hear a single thing about our human civilization for 137 years. Shen-Meng spoke slowly, his voice dropping low. Is there a possibility that I met with a disaster not long after leaving the Haomiao civilization and returning? This. Lao Zhu paused. Out of reflex, he wanted to say a few auspicious words to lighten the mood, but after thinking carefully, he chose to tell the truth. It's possible. If we developed normally, it's impossible for the Nanmei civilization to hear nothing about us for 137 years. Shen-Meng knitted his brows tightly, saying no more. If so, then according to the predetermined future, he would encounter a disaster. And that disaster would definitely happen after the goblin race finished building Tiangong. It was highly likely he would be buried in that disaster. So, he died, the ship died, and everything ended there. Before dying, he threw Tiangong into the time rift. Previously, he thought it was a way for his future self to help his present self develop faster, but looking back now, it looked more like a desperate, mutually assured destruction tactic. If he couldn't survive, he'd destroy it so it wouldn't fall into someone else's hands. Wait a minute. Chen Meng suddenly caught a key point. When the future state and present state of a cosmic taboo item meet, a violent explosion occurs. The smaller the volume, the smaller the range, like Xiaopeng's father's case. The larger the volume, the more terrifying the explosion. And Tiangong's size was even larger than a planet. If the future Tiangong and the present Tiangong met, how terrifying would the explosion be? Unimaginable. It might even rival a level 2000 Arcana main energy cannon. He wasn't sure either. Without comparison data, he couldn't guess, unless there were specific related figures. If it exploded near him, he wouldn't even need an enemy to strike. He'd vanish on his own. After a while, Chen Meng exhaled, forcing himself to calm down. He had pieced together quite a bit. According to the normal predetermined future script, after leaving the Nanmei civilization, he would encounter an extremely terrifying crisis. He might be destroyed in it, and planet Huasha would also be destroyed. He didn't know what kind of crisis could destroy planet Huasha, but at least one milestone was certain. Before Tiangong was finished by the goblin race, that crisis couldn't arrive yet. And Tiangong wasn't easy to build. With the goblin race's technology, it would still take a very long time. That matter, no need to rush for now. That was a long time in the future. Moreover, in the predetermined future, when he left the Nanmei civilization, he didn't take this batch of resources with him. Taking this massive amount of resources this time, planet Huasha would become stronger. Who knows, the disaster that originally put the ship in danger might be handled safely. As long as I get strong fast enough, the script can be rewritten. Right at that moment, Xiao AI's voice suddenly rang in his ear. Captain, good news. Over the past 7 years, with the ship's support and cooperation with the research center, the goblin race's technological level has surged. According to Daba, many difficult problems on the Tiangong blueprint from last time have been completely overcome. It's currently in the final stages. It's expected to be completed in less than 3 months. Chen Meng had just breathed a sigh of relief, but his face instantly darkened. After a long time, he said softly, "Is this really good news?" "No, isn't it?" Xiao AI sounded confused. "Maybe it is." Chen Meng sighed, grabbed the spatial bag, and walked back down the tunnel the way he came, preparing to explain the situation and the reason to Xiaopeng. Right now, he felt like someone who had just received a critical illness notice. He could only stare straight at the approaching death. 3 months. Too short. But short or long was meaningless if he did nothing. 3 months later, the day Tiangong was completed, was very likely the moment the disaster would strike. But even if he ordered a delay in construction, it might not mean anything. The completion date of Tiangong was just an approximate timeline marker. It didn't necessarily have a direct causal relationship with the disaster itself. And according to Xiaopeng's father, this crisis was very likely to happen when he left the Nanmei civilization and returned to the Naya star system. In other words, Chen Meng narrowed his eyes. He felt like he had just touched the door to the solution. Maybe the crisis was being brewed right at the Naya star system. That meant his recent actions around Naya had attracted the attention of a high-level civilization. That unknown high-level civilization had set a trap. As soon as he returned, he'd trigger the death trap. If that was true, then this predetermined future was easy to avoid. Just don't go back to Naya for now. As long as he didn't go back, the trap wouldn't activate. He could escape. At least he could dodge this strike. But that was only true if there was no attack on his past timeline. Xiao Lu was at the Naya star system to protect his past timeline. If that high-level civilization killed Xiao Lu, that would also be the day he died. He could not go back. He had to go back, and he had to go back fast. Furthermore, if possible, he had to find a way to ensure the absolute safety of his past timeline, then return as quickly as possible. During this time, he'd use that batch of resources to upgrade planet Huasha one more time, then strike first to catch the enemy off guard. Running would only prolong death. Only by fighting was there a chance of survival. This was the only way to survive. Blindly running away was just walking into a dead end. Without him, Xiao Lu alone couldn't withstand an attack from a high-level civilization. Very quickly, while his mind was spinning like a top, Chen Meng had returned to the residential area. He handed the tablet to Xiao Pang and recounted the whole story. Xiao Pang didn't say anything, didn't cry. He just sat slumped on the ground, staring blankly, silent. Clearly, his father was perfectly healthy just a moment ago, yet in the blink of an eye, he had turned into a bag of minced meat. Xiao Pang believed his father wasn't killed by Chen Mang. He also believed this was his father's own choice. It's just that, it was hard to swallow. They had just reconciled, hadn't even enjoyed a few days of peaceful father-son bonding, and now they were separated by death. Fate really knew how to play jokes. A long time later, Xiao Pang looked up at Chen Mang with red eyes. He forced a smile. Brother Mang, I don't blame you. My father saved the Nanmei civilization's life. Take this batch of resources. I hope that at a critical moment in the future, you can protect the Nanmei civilization one more time. Chen Mang stayed silent for a long time before replying. He didn't refuse this time. Right now, he truly needed that batch of resources. Xiao Pang was still smiling, but the smile was tinged with a thin layer of sorrow. It's a pity my father is dead. Otherwise, if he knew about this down there, he'd probably be very happy. After hearing the news of his father's passing, Xiao Pang seemed to grow up in an instant. Losing a loved one is one of the heaviest sorrows. But from another angle, losing a loved one also forces a person to mature quickly, forced to shoulder the burden themselves. Xiao Pang's mother had already quietly returned to her room alone. The faint sound of heartbreaking sobs echoed out. Chen Mang paused. Down there? He thought of the second universe, but then shook his head. For an existence like that, how could the soul remain intact? But then he thought, Xiao Pang needed an anchor, and so did this family. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. Do you know about the second universe? It's where living beings go after they die. Your father died in the first universe, but he might not be completely dead. He might have already gone to the second universe. It's just that the process of drifting from the first universe to the second universe takes time, and that time is completely random. It could be 1 second, or it could be 100 million years. I can't be sure when your father will arrive. But I have the ability to travel between the first universe and the second universe. If you want, I can take you there for a trip. And I promise, when I have the chance in the future, I'll help you find your father in the second universe. It's just that the second universe is very big, so we can't find him immediately. What you need to do is take up your father's responsibilities. Take good care of your mother, so that later, when you pass away and reunite in the second universe, your father will be truly happy. Especially when he knows he changed the future, changing the fate of his civilization and his family. Chen Mang spent some time explaining to Xiao Pang what the second universe was. Then he took Xiao Pang onto planet Huasha and led him to a planet in the second universe. When he saw the hungry ghosts existing there with his own eyes, Xiao Pang believed it. The sorrow on his face faded significantly, replaced by motivation. This wasn't a permanent separation, just a temporary one. Xiao Pang returned to the residential area, his eyes full of life, looking at Chen Mang with a smile. Brother Mang, I know you have big things to do. You go handle your business first. Father already left 9/10 of the resources for you. The remaining 1/10 is enough to maintain our current business. I believe I can do it. I'll make Father's business even bigger. He paused, then added, that fridge. Just leave it with us. Thank you, Brother Mang. After parting ways, Chen Mang left the residential area, returned to planet Huasha, and hid in the pseudo-space until evening. He sat in the cabin, silent for a long time before sighing. He truly couldn't bear to look at Xiao Pang's eyes at that moment. But he could only tell a white lie. Having hope is better than having no hope, even if that hope is fake. I know I'm lying. But if I didn't lie, he would collapse. Xiao Pang's father had turned himself into a cosmic taboo item. And an explosion occurred when his present state and past state met. In that situation, if his soul was still intact, it would truly be a miracle. It was almost 100% impossible for him to reach the second universe. Completely dead, erased in the truest sense of the word. But right at that moment, Xiao AI's voice suddenly rang out in the ship. Captain, I found the detection data from the explosion just now. There was a weak spatial fluctuation that appeared after the explosion. I've seen this kind of fluctuation before. When a living being dies, this kind of spatial fluctuation is likely to appear. It's the fluctuation of a soul returning to the second universe. In other words, Xiaopeng's father's soul seems to have actually gone to the second universe. How is that possible? Chen Meng frowned. Although the scale of that explosion wasn't huge, it was still an explosion of a cosmic taboo item under the rules of the universe. That kind of explosion didn't destroy the soul? I just told a lie, and now you're telling me it might be true? This coincidence is uncomfortably perfect. If a normal person was killed by a bomb of similar power, there's a high chance their soul wouldn't be completely destroyed. Theoretically, yes. Xiao Ai was also puzzled, continuing her report. But Xiaopeng's father had two souls. Although they were two people, the souls were identical. There's never been a precedent like this in my database. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I can only guess that an unbelievable anomaly occurred, causing Xiaopeng's father's soul to retain its integrity. Moreover, both souls are intact. Then, they merged into one and went to the second universe together. Chen Meng grew even more confused hearing this. What does that make him? 1 + 1 = 2. Not sure. Xiao Ai hesitated for a beat. But one thing is certain. Xiaopeng truly has a chance to reunite with his father in the second universe. And the probability isn't small at all. The corner of Chen Meng's mouth twitched slightly. This was beyond his comprehension. Isn't this a normal situation? Not normal, Xiao Ai replied immediately. Preliminary judgment. The rules of the universe split the cosmic taboo item into 4 parts. Xiaopeng's father's physical body in the past state. Xiaopeng's father's physical body in the present state. Xiaopeng's father's soul in the past state. Xiaopeng's father's soul in the present state. Those 4 things collided. The bodies exploded, the souls merged. Chen Meng looked up at Tiangong, which was covering the entire planet above his head. His heart felt a bit lighter. Otherwise, he would always feel like he indirectly killed Xiaopeng's father. Living in the second universe is still living. As long as you're alive, there's hope for everything. At least, he wasn't completely erased. As long as he found Xiaopeng's father later, he could bring him back to the first universe at any time. Consider it an indirect resurrection. But the most important thing right now was to go explore Tiangong. Chen Meng looked down at the brass key in his hand. This was what Xiaopeng's father had given him. It was also the first cosmic taboo item to appear after Tiangong. Xiaopeng's father suspected this key had some connection to Tiangong, so he kept it until he met him to hand it over personally. Getting into Tiangong was very simple. When Xiaopeng's father was alive, thanks to his connections, Chen Meng had obtained a green card for the research lab. He could openly walk past the guards at the entrance, using the identity of a Nanmei civilization researcher to enter publicly. When Planet Huasha stopped at the entrance of Tiangong, the sight before him was breathtaking. The first thing that caught his eye was the 9 massive pillars. This Tiangong was the size of a planet, but its mass far exceeded one. Just a glance was enough to create an overwhelming sense of pressure. His massive planet Huasha looked pitifully small in front of Tiangong. At this moment, the ship was speeding along the ground leading to the entrance. The 9 pillars were covered in totem-like patterns, large and clear. Even from far away, the naked eye could see every line clearly. Moreover, there seemed to be some kind of technology inside Tiangong. Even at such a distance, it could be seen extremely clearly. Visual technology? Or was space itself reshaped here? Chen Meng sat in the control cabin, pushing the throttle, narrowing his eyes at the approaching entrance. He couldn't help but be curious. Xiao Ai, are Daba and the others really almost done building Tiangong? What materials did they use? For a material volume this massive, they'd have to hollow out several planets. How is Tiangong's power source designed? Has the goblin race's technology really reached this level in 7 years? That's too fast. So fast it's like someone is pushing them from behind. Very quickly, Xiao Ai replied in the cabin. Reporting to the captain, I don't have all the details yet. I'm asking Daba. But I know the gist of it. 7 years ago, they requested a batch of cyber miners. A lot of materials were obtained using the cyber miners, and the goblin race is inherently skilled in architecture. Xiao Ai paused for a moment, then continued. Daba just shared the database. 99% of the materials used in the project have growth properties. Their initial volume wasn't as massive as it is now. They built the entire Tiangong using a modular approach. The blueprint is divided into 999,999 modules. By assembling nearly 1,000,000 modules, Tiangong is formed. The main material is called spirit mud. This is a special material. After undergoing abnormal time fluctuations, it will continuously grow, becoming massive and extremely durable. The goblin race used the cyber mining site to extract the spirit mud. Then, relying on their racial trait of being unaffected by the flow of time in a time rift, they brought the spirit mud into the time rift, let it grow large enough, then brought it out and stuffed it into the modules. Just like that, each part of Tiangong was erected. Furthermore, Xiao AI rattled off a long string of technical jargon. Chen Meng understood about half of it, but the feeling in his heart grew heavier. This technology wasn't just building. This was raising an entire planetary scale structure. As soon as planet Huasha passed the checkpoint at Tiangong's entrance, Chen Meng didn't go deep. He stopped the ship and changed course. He headed to the Cerulean planet, intending to see the progress and methods of Daba and his crew with his own eyes. When Chen Meng arrived at the Cerulean planet, he witnessed a scene that made his scalp tingle. In the space outside the Cerulean planet's atmosphere, a massive foundation was floating in the universe. Countless trains shuttled continuously between the surface and space. On that foundation, countless goblins stood in clusters, operating robotic arms and large mechanical equipment. They were installing giant stone blocks and other modular components into their exact positions according to the blueprint. It wasn't just almost done. It was truly closing up. The whole scene looked exactly like assembling Legos. Just a glance revealed hundreds of trains running back and forth, accompanied by millions of goblins working nonstop. Wait a minute. Where did all these goblins come from? Chen Meng was momentarily stunned. He suddenly realized he hadn't paid attention to the situation in planet Huasha's ecosystem for way too long. The last time he visited the goblin race, there were only a few hundred. This time, 10 million? Where did millions of these dwarfs pop out from? Do goblins birth hundreds of thousands in one litter? What kind of joke is this? Xiao AI's voice rang out in the ship. The goblin race chose to reproduce inside the time rift, so their reproduction speed increased significantly. Currently, the goblin race's population is nearly 10 million. On the Cerulean planet, they can be considered a major race now. Huh? Aren't goblins almost unaffected by the flow of time in a time rift? Chen Meng asked immediately. It's mostly unaffected, not completely unaffected. Chen Meng nodded slightly. He remembered when he was on the Cerulean planet, they encountered the first time rift. A normal person going in there, a few seconds outside meant decades inside. But when Daba went in, after a while outside, Daba only felt like a few months had passed. If that's the case, then yes, they could use the time rift to accelerate reproduction. So it turns out, these millions were raised using time. Did a time rift appear on the Cerulean planet? Chen Meng asked further. Yes. To be precise, time rifts appeared on dozens of planets. The flow rate in each rift is different. Only the time rift on the Cerulean planet is the largest, and its flow rate is the highest. Xiao AI paused for a beat, then clarified. This is a residual effect from when planet Huasha was disrupted by the black hole last time. Where is it? Right over there. Chen Meng looked in the direction Xiao AI pointed. Next to Tiangong's foundation, there was indeed a massive time rift. He had never seen a rift this big enough to stuff an entire planet inside. In fact, even stuffing Tiangong inside would be enough. Chen Meng fell silent, his expression complex. Many things suddenly connected. He finally understood why his future self found a massive time rift to stuff Tiangong into. Over these 7 years, many things had happened inside planet Huasha that he had no grasp of. I thought I was the one steering the wheel, but it turns out there's a whole world running behind my back. Contact Daba. Ask him what that safe means and how to open it. Chen Meng ordered. Yes. According to the Nanmei civilization's information, they had found a safe in Tiangong. It had no keyhole. It was a completely sealed cube, like a solid block of steel. And it was extremely durable, to the point that even shooting it with an Arcana main energy cannon didn't leave a scratch. Chen Meng thought there might be something useful inside. Not the kind of thing that decides everything in one shot. If it were, his future self wouldn't have thrown it back to the past, but would have used it to overcome the crisis. But it was definitely something to help him get stronger. A puzzle piece, a key. Not salvation, but an advantage. Very quickly, Xiao AI reported back. Captain, Daba says. He didn't design any safe. Yeah. Chen Meng nodded, saying no more. Because if it wasn't Daba, then it was almost certainly made by himself. He'd know once he saw it with his own eyes. Chen Meng left the Cerulean planet, returned to the Nanmei civilization's Tiangong, and steered planet Huasha deeper inside. Tiangong was terrifyingly vast. A total of 99 zones, each with a function. A breeding zone for raising livestock and poultry, a botanical zone for rare cosmic plants, and more. He knew this because right at the entrance, there was a flat map detailing the functions of all 99 zones. But it seemed Tiangong, after being built, was thrown in here before it was ever officially put into use. At least, he passed through several zones without seeing any traces of operation. The botanical zone was completely empty, not even dirt. It was abnormally clean inside. It was unclear whether everything was swept away when it was thrown into the time rift, or if it had never been used. This kind of cleanliness felt more like a shell prepared for someone, rather than a place that had been lived in. The framework was massive, but for planet Huasha, crossing it was still too fast, even though he tried to slow down. After all, massive was only relative to normal architecture. Planet Huasha was something that ran through the universe, at 1/3 the speed of light. If he went full throttle, crossing the entire Tiangong would only take a few blinks of an eye. Of course, the price would be smashing Tiangong to pieces. The zone he was heading to was the core, the King's Palace zone. This was the zone Daba designed for him to live in. That safe was also discovered here. He didn't see anyone along the way, but when he reached the King's Palace zone, he saw many people in white coats gathered around researching. Hearing the noise from planet Huasha, they turned their heads to look. But as soon as they saw the Research Institute flag on the train car, they withdrew their gazes and went back to work. So, they treated him as one of their own. Saved him the trouble of explaining. But that also meant the thing here might have been dissected by them for a very long time. Although he was a bit curious about which research institute had the capability to build a train that looked so extraordinary at first glance. Just the 5 Akana main energy cannons on the roof were enough to say it all. A normal ship couldn't even use them if they built them. But Chen Meng didn't dwell on it for too long. The Nanmei civilization had too many research institutes, most of them anonymous, quietly working on projects. Never having heard of them was perfectly normal. Very quickly, the research team went back to work. They drove hovercars, running continuously through the nooks and crannies of this zone, using all sorts of high-tech equipment to skin every detail, not missing a single pattern, not missing a single crack in the bricks. Chen Meng led Biaozi and a few others off the ship. This was the first time he truly stood inside Tiangong. The Tiangong designed by Daba was very unconventional. There was no second floor, only a single floor. In exchange, the ceiling was terrifyingly high, so high it surpassed mountains. The air circulation was very open, the lighting strangely clear. Standing inside, it didn't feel suffocating at all. It didn't even feel like being inside a building, but more like standing in the middle of nature. The downside was that the space utilization rate was extremely low, but the upside was staggering. A visual experience hard to describe. Daba was truly crazy, but this kind of crazy was convincing. The pinnacle of decorative art is often the waste of space. Only by wasting it to the extreme can you create an extreme impact. Have they researched anything over here? Chen Meng took the tablet Xiao AI handed him. On the screen was the Nanmei civilization's research report on Tiangong over the past few years. Naturally, these things were also collected by Xiao Peng's father. Besides his godlike connections, there was another very simple reason. There was nothing worth keeping secret. To put it bluntly, they had researched practically nothing. The only thing they confirmed were the built-in features of Tiangong. For example, Tiangong could create clouds. At extreme heights, it could create artificial clouds at the top of the palace, along with an artificial sun and artificial wind, making people inside completely unaware they were in a building. Each zone could even have different weather, including extreme weather like hail, storms, and heavy rain. Xiao AI stood beside him and explained, when Daba built Tiangong, One design philosophy was not wanting the architecture to create a sense of confinement. Humans are the masters of the architecture, not its prisoners. Chen Meng didn't say much. Clearly, Daba had poured his heart and soul into it. But what he cared about most right now was the energy system. He couldn't figure it out, and neither could the Nanmei civilization. Daba's answer was, there's still an energy issue unresolved. It's expected to be completed in a month, meaning there was currently no answer as to what the specific energy source was. After that, Chen Meng blended into the crowd. Wearing a white lab coat like a researcher, he walked straight into the center of the king's palace zone, looking toward the safe surrounded by police tape. 4 square corners, a standard cube, exactly 1 meter in length, width, and height. In all of Tiangong, there was almost nothing this out of place. Only this was special. Chen Meng took out the brass key left by Xiao Pang's father. He stared at the safe in front of him. Sure enough, there was no keyhole. He tried placing the key on the surface, but there was still no reaction. It was quite heavy, but with Biaozi's current physique, lifting it wasn't hard. Chen Meng bent down to check the bottom of the safe. Still nothing. Sharp edges, completely sealed. Did I leave this thing behind? Chen Meng narrowed his eyes, staring intently, starting to trace his own logic. First, one thing could be confirmed. According to the predetermined future, Tiangong being thrown into the time rift happened after he left the Nanmei civilization and returned to the Naya star system. And this safe was also created during that time. Just a few months. In the predetermined future timeline, he hadn't even received Xiao Pang's father's batch of resources. So the train couldn't possibly have made a massive technological breakthrough in such a short time. In other words, it was highly likely this safe was made using planet Huasha's existing technology. As long as he stuck to that direction, he'd find the answer. If I left this for myself, it definitely wasn't for show. It must be openable, and it must be opened the right way. He lowered his head in deep thought, going through the supermodel effects of each component on the tablet one by one. But in the end, he still couldn't link any component to the safe. Could it be the fridge? Or the inside of the fridge? But that was clearly impossible. He flipped through the research documents left by the Nanmei civilization. It clearly stated that they used a level 200 Arcanon energy main gun. It withstood level 200 without a scratch. So what about level 500? But something felt off to him. I wouldn't be stupid enough to leave a safe for my past self, only to expect my past self to blast it open with a cannon. What if it destroys whatever is inside? I wouldn't take a risk like that. Chen Meng furrowed his brows tightly. He opened Daba's previous blueprint of the Heavenly Palace on his tablet, scanning every single detail, trying to dig up any anomalies. Xiao AI, standing nearby, suddenly spoke up. Captain, over the past few years, Daba has made some minor tweaks to the Heavenly Palace's blueprint. I just got the latest version. Do you want to take a look? Show me. Soon enough, Chen Meng looked down at the 3D holographic blueprint on the screen. The lines were a tangled mess, densely packed with symbols and numbers. Just looking at it gave him a headache. But upon closer inspection, he could see that the Heavenly Palace was divided into 99 zones. According to Daba's concept, those who could live in the Heavenly Palace in the future would all be people of high status. Thus, the living quarters were heavily emphasized, with each zone serving a specific function. The Heavenly Palace would replace the train as the center of power, while the planetary train would focus entirely on combat. His foresight is truly deep. But the deeper it goes, the more it seems like he's preparing for a long era, not just surviving a few battles. Just then, Chen Meng let out a soft raising an eyebrow. On the blueprint, there was an additional zone, designated as Zone 100. This zone wasn't on the surface, it was underground. It was the only basement-level zone. According to the design, the entire underground section of the Heavenly Palace was meant for energy systems, armed defense mechanisms, weather control devices, and various other equipment. Yet, there was a specific hollowed-out area, located right beneath Zone 99. What is Zone 100 used for? Chen Meng asked. Xiao AI didn't answer immediately. Dozens of seconds later, she finally said, I just asked Daba. Daba said he wanted to turn this area into a special zone, like a villa's basement, for specific functions. As for what exactly, when the time comes, it'll be whatever you want it to be. So how do we get down there? Chen Meng tapped his cane against the floor. The floor of the heavenly palace was absurdly hard. Whether it was the floor or the outer shell, it could withstand a level 200 Arcanon energy main gun without a scratch. There was no data on its true limit, because the Nanmei civilization had only tested it up to level 200. They still hadn't figured it out. Xiao AI replied, her voice helpless. The heavenly palace is mostly complete overall, but many minor details are still being finalized. Daba's idea was that Zone 100 must be extremely secretive, ensuring that only you can enter. As for the specific way in and out, there's no perfect solution yet. Qin looked down at the ground, his eyes darkening. Right beneath his feet was the location of Zone 100. Well then, it seemed he might have to go big. He'd just take the entire heavenly palace with him and study it slowly. As long as he erased the Nanmei civilization's mark on the planet below, he could store both the planet and the heavenly palace into his spatial gate all at once. The condition for storing such a massive object was that it had to be anchored to a planet. He could also throw out an abandoned mining planet to act as a base, but at this close range, it would be a disaster. Pondering for a moment, Qin looked at the complete blueprint of the heavenly palace beneath his feet. This was the model based on Daba's design. He scanned it more carefully. The material of the heavenly palace could even block detection scans. Radar couldn't penetrate completely sealed areas. For example, the underground equipment couldn't be detected by radar, nor could Zone 100 be seen. This wasn't just about being sturdy anymore. It was intentionally hidden. Based on the complete blueprint, Qin suddenly noticed something very strange. In a corner of Zone 99, there was a messy cluster of rocks, some tall, some short, looking like an art installation, somewhat resembling the stone statues on Easter Island. Looking at it horizontally, it was nothing special, but looking down from above, you could see the shorter stone pillars formed a character. Mang. No, wait, half a character. Because the character, Mang, was missing a dot in the dog radical. No way. Qin mouth twitched. He hadn't expected the decryption method to be this simple. A classic, darkest under the lamp trick. Did I really leave behind a puzzle like this? It's both childish and effective. The Nanmei civilization had naturally scoured the heavenly palace inside out long ago. They definitely must have suspected this rock cluster too. Even now, quite a few people in white lab coats were holding scanning devices, circling the rock cluster in Zone 99. There was only one reason they were still stuck here. The character Mang was Chinese, while the Nanmei civilization used a cosmic language system. With a different writing system, they could see the pattern, but couldn't understand its meaning. That was enough. Just a language barrier was enough to stump a whole bunch of geniuses. In that case, Qin didn't hesitate anymore. He waved his hand. A squad of armed mechs marched out of the planetary train, immediately subduing all the researchers in Zone 99 to ensure no information leaked out. Then, he strode toward the messy rock cluster. Biaozi, carrying the cubic safe on his shoulder, followed closely behind. Upon arriving, under Xiao AI's guidance, the angle was continuously adjusted. Finally, when the cubic safe was pushed into a specific spot, a dry clank suddenly echoed from beneath the ground, followed immediately by a series of gears turning, the metallic clatter spreading under the floor. That's it. I did leave a lock, but the lock wasn't on the safe. The lock was the entire heavenly palace itself. The tall stone pillars slowly sank into the ground. A dark hole was revealed, and then steps materialized one by one. This design is truly clever and quite amusing. Qin chuckled softly. Looking at it now, that safe probably didn't contain anything at all. It wasn't a safe. It was just a solid cast block, used as a positioning key. The real prize was in Zone 100 underground. My future self. Hiding things like this, it's both annoying and foolproof. Qin was the first to go down. As he stepped onto the first stair, the pitch-black walls on both sides instantly lit up. The passageway was narrow. Compared to the heavenly palace, it was like a mere slit, barely wide enough for 4 people to walk side by side. After walking a short distance, the entirety of Zone 100 revealed itself. It wasn't large. About the size of a basketball court, 9 meters high. The floor was paved with gray stone. In the center sat a wooden chest. Qin approached, took a deep breath, and slowly opened the chest. There was no lock. The brass key still couldn't be used, because it didn't belong here. Inside, there was no mountain of resources like he had imagined, no chip recording the disaster. Nor was there anything that would instantly boost his combat power. There was only one item. A bracelet. A solitary bracelet. Item name, Hell Bracelet. Chen Meng stood still, his expression complex. He picked up the bracelet, lost in deep thought for a long time. He never thought he would obtain the Hell Bracelet in this manner. The Hell Equipment set was the only unique set in the entire universe, possessing absolute uniqueness. Only one person could own it. It consisted of 7 parts in total: Hell Staff, Hell Hat, Hell Glasses, Hell Flint, Hell Attire, Hell Sleeve, and the Hell Bracelet. The first 3 parts only existed in the first universe. The next 3 parts only existed in the second universe. As for the final part, no one had ever known how to get it. In fact, if one didn't gather the first 6 parts, they wouldn't even know the name of the final part. The only thing people knew was the first 6 parts had many copies, and anyone had a chance to get their hands on them. But there was only one Hell Bracelet in the entire universe. Whoever obtained it, and then gathered the other 6 parts, would unlock the Hell Equipment set. No one knew what this set could do, and no one had ever owned it. Only a small handful of people had even heard of its existence. Just how far did I go in the future? And why throw this back to the present? Chen Meng looked down at the item effects on the bracelet. The effects were so simple that it was almost crude, completely disproportionate to its unique attribute. Special effect. The wearer of the Hell Bracelet will be healthy, free from illness and pain. Calling it an effect was technically correct, but it sounded more like a blessing. It wasn't bad, but compared to the word unique, it was far too underwhelming. Or maybe, the true power doesn't lie in the individual pieces, but in the complete set? He immediately returned to the planetary train. As soon as he sat down in the control cabin, a control panel popped up on the screen. All parts of the Hell Equipment set have been collected. The equipment set will officially be unlocked. The Hell Equipment set is the only unique equipment set in the first universe and the second universe. There are no other sets. Others will no longer have the chance to obtain this equipment set. You are the sole owner. When you die, the equipment set will follow you to the second universe. Or if your soul is completely destroyed, the equipment set will be destroyed along with you. There will be no second user. The set's effects will unlock in 24 hours. Chen Meng let out a breath. He hadn't expected his future self to give him such a massive gift. This meant that according to the predetermined timeline, in about 3 months, he would still receive the Hell Bracelet. He immediately thought of something. Does this thing currently count as a cosmic contraband? Will I encounter a second one in the future? Theoretically, the bracelet in his hand was the future state of the item. It should technically be classified as a cosmic contraband. If he received the Hell Bracelet again in the future according to the set timeline, would it explode like Little Fatty's father's incident, or would it create a second equipment set? If it was the second case, it would break the uniqueness rule. So the first case was highly likely. In other words, he had to avoid touching the Hell Bracelet a second time in the future. The moment he encountered it again would be the moment his equipment set lost its effect. An insurance policy, but one that comes with a built-in detonator. That's definitely my style. Humph. Chen Meng said no more. He continued to control the research team in the Heavenly Palace, patiently waiting for time to pass, waiting for the Hell Equipment set's effects to unlock. But right at that moment, Xiao AI suddenly reported urgently inside the ship. Captain, there's an unexpected situation. I just discovered that the Hell Bracelet shows absolutely no signs of temporal corrosion. In other words, the Hell Bracelet is not a cosmic contraband, nor has it ever been eroded by a time rift. Chen Meng frowned, pausing for a beat before asking, "You're saying the Hell Bracelet has never been eroded by a time rift?" "That's correct." Xiao AI answered firmly. Chen Meng immediately frowned. Impossible. It was almost certain that the Hell Bracelet appeared along with the Heavenly Palace. It couldn't have been stuffed in later. The Heavenly Palace was transferred from the future through a time rift, so how did this bracelet dodge it? He tapped lightly on the cabin wall, his voice heavy. That storage area, Zone 100, doesn't have the power to resist temporal erosion. Xiao AI was also stumped. I can't explain that, but the data I'm receiving confirms it. Chen Meng fell silent. If that was the case, he He felt he had underestimated the word unique. Unique didn't just mean unique in the entire universe, but unique throughout the past, present, and future of the entire universe. No matter the space-time, there was only one Hell bracelet, one Hell equipment set. That was absolute uniqueness. If that's true, then this isn't equipment. This is a rule. Things were starting to get complicated in a way that it wasn't just about getting stronger anymore. Chen Meng said no more, just waited. Waited for the equipment set's effects to unlock. Finally, 24 hours passed. On the planetary train's control screen, a display panel slowly popped up. The universe's only unique equipment set, Hell equipment set. The first 3 items are only created in the first universe. The next 3 items are only created in the second universe. And the final item, the Hell bracelet, is only created in the future. In the present and the past, it is eternally impossible to obtain this special item. Only by traveling to the future can one obtain this special item. Chen Meng furrowed his brow slightly. He still didn't understand what traveling to the future meant. If one truly traveled to the future, wouldn't that timeline still be the present for the person standing there? Or maybe, the future here isn't a point in time, but a plane of existence? Before he could think deeper, those lines of text gradually faded, replaced by 4 new lines. The universe has countless timelines. The past timeline belongs to the unchangeable. Even if one uses spatiotemporal reversal to return to the past and destroy a civilization, the cosmic rules will only make micro-corrections, leaving the present unchanged. The present timeline belongs to the ever-changing. You can do whatever you want. The future will drastically change based on any decision, and cosmic rules cannot interfere. The future timeline belongs to the infinite. From God-tier civilizations to cosmic rules, nothing can interfere. Reads like a lecture, Chen Meng muttered softly. He still hadn't seen the effects yet. It just felt like he was triggering a massive storyline. Don't tell me, the thing I just opened is a lock, not an item? Next, the screen displayed another series of text, this time not limited to 4 sentences. There is only one true timeline in the universe, the present timeline. Countless future timelines are self-generated and deduced by the universe, not predetermined. If a future you says you will die tomorrow, that is not absolute. That future you is merely from one of countless future timelines. Any action you take right now will change the future. You might die the day after tomorrow, or you might die in the very next second. Information from the future is inaccurate, and you must even be wary of your own self from the future. When someone in a future timeline realizes they are in the future and not the true timeline, they will do everything possible to return to the present timeline and kill their present self in order to truly possess their own life. Therefore, quite a few beings from future timelines will use any means to smuggle themselves back to the present timeline. To prevent this smuggling from taking effect, the cosmic rules, aside from interfering, also established cosmic contraband. If the smuggling is successful, it will detonate, ensuring the safety of the original self. The Hell bracelet was born of these circumstances. The Hell equipment set, forged by the Creator, has only one purpose: to act as the supreme prosecutor of the entire universe. But the final special item was stolen by the future Creator and sealed within a future timeline, making it extremely difficult to obtain. The entire universe is composed of the past, present, and future. Only by possessing all 3 simultaneously can one attain a perspective high enough to own the entire universe. Chen Meng stood still, his face practically unchanged, but his mind was in turmoil. The Creator? A God-tier entity? Or something above even gods? Everything is getting more and more complicated. The Hell equipment set. It's actually something made by the Creator? Sounds like a title, not a proper name. Finally, those lines of text dissolved, and a new panel appeared. This time, the actual effects. Hell equipment set effects. 1. Ensures the past timeline of your civilization and yourself remains eternally absolute. Cannot be destroyed by any means. 2. Ensures the present timeline of your civilization and yourself remains eternally absolute. Cannot be affected by any means. 3. Ensures the future timeline of your civilization and yourself remains eternally absolute, cannot be eroded by any means. So, the thing I was most worried about, the past timeline, has been locked down. Little 6 is no longer a fatal weakness. For it is also a key. For effects. Short and concise. But Chen Meng understood immediately upon seeing them. He let out a breath, a grin of utter satisfaction spreading across his face. Excellent. This solves the exact bottleneck that's been bugging me these past few days. From now on, he didn't have to worry about someone sneaking into his past timeline to stab him in the back. If they're so tough, they can face me head-on instead of playing dirty. Little 6 is no longer a fatal weakness, and I'm no longer being led by the nose. Excellent. He didn't fully understand the other 3 effects yet, nor did he have a use for them at the moment. But they were definitely good things. Better to have them than not. Right after, a new panel appeared on the control screen. The creator is not the one who created the entire universe, but rather the strongest being to ever exist in the universe, the one with the highest chance of escaping the universe. However, right on the verge of victory, they were sneak attacked by their own future state, failing by a hair's breadth. The Hell Bracelet was stolen and sealed in a future timeline. Before perishing, to prevent the future state creator from gathering the full Hell equipment set, not to escape, but to seal off the entire universe, that being split the universe into the first universe and the second universe. The 6 special items were separated and scattered across the 2 universes, making it extremely difficult for them to connect, ensuring the future state creator could never gather the full set. The Hell equipment set has only 2 ultimate effects: leaving the universe or sealing the universe. To leave the universe, the only key is the Hell equipment set. But the outside world after leaving is unknown. The other effect is to completely seal this universe, so that whatever is outside can never disturb the inside. But in exchange, everyone would be like frogs at the bottom of a well with the lid shut. The future state and present state of the creator disagreed on this choice, leading to a massive war. Then, the screen threw out a story. A flea in a cup knows how to jump very high, but trapped in a 10 centimeters tall cup with a lid on it. It will bump its head countless times, then gradually adjust itself to jump exactly 10 centimeters. Even if the lid is open later, it will still only jump that high. Its descendants will do the same. That is self-castration. A very long time ago, there truly was a great crisis outside the universe. Civilizations once tried to leave the universe, but without exception, they were all wiped out. And so, over a long period of time, civilizations began to self-castrate. Gradually, rumors even emerged. Nothing in the universe can exceed the speed of light. No one wanted to leave the universe anymore. But there was once a time when traveling dozens of times the speed of light was completely normal. Even the future state creator believed in the Great Crisis, thinking they shouldn't leave the universe. But, in reality, the lid outside the universe has already been lifted. There are observers watching all living beings self-castrate like it's a joke, even recording the data. The right thing to do now is to charge out. Fill the room with fleas and give the observers a headache, instead of locking ourselves in the cup forever. You have inherited my equipment set. I hope you inherit my ideology. Charge out. Let those observers know. If you lift the lid off a cup full of fleas, you'll inevitably have to deal with a room full of fleas. Even in death, one must seek the truth. Chen Meng looked at the text, his expression complex. He remained silent for a long time, then looked down at the birthmark on the back of his hand. The storyline triggered by the Hell equipment set was clearly related to the deepest secrets of the universe. Let alone the Zerg princess. Even the leaders of many god-tier civilizations might not know this. He thought it would mention his level 0 authority. But no, it wasn't mentioned at all. Even the creator didn't know? Or was that thing on a completely different level? Then where exactly did his level 0 authority come from? Why did it feel like it was even higher than the creator? The next moment, the special items belonging to the Hell equipment set inside the cabin began to turn into phantoms, then merged into his body. He couldn't see himself wearing anything, but he vaguely felt like he was donning something. Like wearing an invisible suit. Very faint, but real. From now on, there would be no more hats flying off. He wouldn't have to worry about the Hell hat being knocked off when he went out anymore. Because now, the hat was no longer just a hat worn on his head. But because of this, he couldn't lean on his cane like before. The Hell staff had merged into him too. Looks like I'll have to find something else to hold. Otherwise, my hands will feel uncomfortably empty. Let's go home, Chen Meng ordered. As he prepared to leave, Chen Meng actively deactivated the planetary train's radar shielding, completely exposing the train's existence and information. Almost just a few minutes later, dozens of wormholes suddenly appeared around the Heavenly Palace. They're here. The ones who set the trap in Naya, or the ones waiting for the signal. Well, saves me the trouble of looking for them. A massive number of armed trains poured out of the wormholes, lining up in neat formations. The previously peaceful atmosphere instantly turned murderous. Expert Daba, the entire Nanmei civilization is frantically assembling its military forces. Their reaction and efficiency, not bad. Chen Meng sighed softly. With this kind of performance, unless they were utterly crushed to extinction by a higher-tier civilization, they wouldn't necessarily lose against a civilization of the same tier. At least they didn't panic. It was just that they were facing something they couldn't possibly chew. Very quickly, an unknown call connected to the ship. Chen Meng answered. The screen displayed a large office, packed with middle-aged men in uniforms. In the center sat an old man with silvery white temples. The old man spoke in a hoarse voice. May I ask what position you hold in your level 5 civilization? Human civilization. Same as you. Chen Meng replied curtly. The old man's expression immediately became a notch more respectful. May I ask what matter you wish to negotiate by coming here this time? The fact that the other party actively revealed themselves meant there was still goodwill. Before figuring out his intentions, they would try not to open fire. No civilization wanted to actively provoke a war with a civilization of the same tier. Not to mention, the old man was glancing at the planetary train's configuration data on his tablet, his mouth twitching. If they really fought this kind of monster, they probably couldn't even break its defenses. It would be a completely one-sided slaughter. And this was just one train. A civilization couldn't possibly have just one, meaning the human civilization might have many more like it. They couldn't fathom how a level 5 civilization possessed such power, but now wasn't the time to dig deeper. Asking for his intentions first was still the safest choice. Yes, in war, the unknown is always the most dangerous thing. Yeah, Chen Meng nodded slightly. He tweaked a few parts of the suicide note left by little Fatty's father, then sent it over, his voice calm. I had a friend in your civilization. He was a merchant. Before he passed away, he entrusted me with protecting your civilization. Your civilization will face a life-and-death crisis in 137 years. Of course, this timeline isn't absolute. It could change. I will leave you a refrigerator. If you encounter a crisis you can't handle yourselves, contact me through the refrigerator. I will come to your aid and help you pull through. The leader of the Nanmei civilization looked at the note, stunned. He glanced at the strategist beside him, exchanging looks, before looking straight at Chen Meng on the screen. For him to have a friend like you is his honor. Your promise is also the honor of the Nanmei civilization. Besides this, is there any other assistance we can provide? No need. Chen Meng shook his head, then suddenly remembered something. One more thing. My civilization's territory is located on the other side of the cosmic rift. A few Arcanon energy main gun blasts flew through the rift. I want to ask, was it your side that fired them? The leader of the Nanmei civilization froze, then hesitated. As for firing, we definitely fired. No civilization would pass up the chance to fire cannons into a cosmic rift. We usually fire into the rift during military drills too. That might have been us. Moreover, a few shots were fired through spatio-temporal reversal, so the power might have been a bit high. No big deal. Chen Meng waved his hand. Just don't fire blindly anymore. When I found out, I returned the favor with a few shots of my own. But I didn't fire through spatio-temporal reversal. It'll take a few tens of millions of years to reach your civilization, so no need to panic. I've warned you. Don't make me warn you with cannons next time. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Chen Meng stood up, then remembered something and added, Oh, one more thing. This heavenly palace is mine. I accidentally dropped it here last time. Out of respect for my friendship with someone from the Nanmei civilization. I'm taking the heavenly palace. Good thing you guys only studied it and didn't break it. Let's go. The next moment, the connection was cut. The planetary train disappeared from the Nanmei civilization's radar. At the same time, the heavenly palace also vanished. With that, The trip to the Nanmei civilization was officially over. Despite encountering quite a few hiccups, the overall result was good. The planetary train immediately traveled straight to the Naya star system through the refrigerator. He needed a wormhole to get there, but he didn't need one to get back. Chen Meng sat in the cabin, summarizing the journey to himself. The hell equipment set, the past and future stuff. It's too messy. It temporarily exceeded what he could grasp at this stage. But overall, it was fine, because the tangible gains were crystal clear, the batch of resources left by little Fatty's father. That massive fortune was enough to push the planetary train to a whole new level. Now that I have the capital, it's time to see what exactly this trap in Naya is. He wanted to know what kind of crisis the Naya star system would face, to the point of potential annihilation. And with his past timeline now eternally absolute, if he couldn't win, couldn't he just run? If he wanted to run, who could stop him? Spatial lockdowns were useless. His escapes never relied on wormholes anyway. The Naya star system, the headquarters of the human civilization. At this moment, the planetary train drifted silently in deep space. Chen Meng sat in the ship, taking inventory of the newly acquired resources. He looked at the current resource dashboard, then fell into deep thought. This time, I don't have a passive way out anymore. Whatever it is, bring it on. Currently, the planetary train had a total of 41,400 trillion units of iron ore, meaning a full 41.4 quadrillion. Without needing any further preparation, Chen Meng decided to upgrade immediately. This batch of resources was enough to push the ship to a new realm. First target, the ship's armor. He just hesitated slightly, his eyes resting on the armor's super effects, pondering. Level 500 super effect. Immune to all energy attacks, simultaneously absorbs all energy attacks, and uses the absorbed energy to temporarily increase the armor's level, with no level cap. Level 1000 super effect. Immune to all physical attacks, and can also use absorbed energy to temporarily increase the armor's level. Both of these effects were unique in the universe. With those two, did he even need to upgrade further? In terms of defense, he was practically invincible. No one could break it. But practically was what got people killed, especially when he didn't know what his opponents would bring. After thinking for a moment, he still decided to push the armor to level 2000 first, just to see what the level 2000 super effect was. Although the civilizations he currently encountered mostly fought with energy and physical attacks were rare, higher-tier civilizations were unpredictable. The higher the level, the safer it was. Immediately, consuming 20,000 trillion iron ore, the train's steel armor reached level 2000, eating up nearly half of the ship's iron reserves. Looking back at the upgrade history, from 500 to 1,000 cost 3,750 trillion. From 1,000 to 2,000 jumped straight to 20,000 trillion. The higher the level, the more bloated the cost. More importantly, he had deduced that if he didn't use his level 0 authority for this upgrade, and used manhwa stones instead, it would require 30 billion of them. It was no longer astronomical, it was absurd. When he looted the twin planets of the Kasa civilization, he only got 370,000 manhwa stones. 30 billion? Even if the Kasa civilization grinded for nearly 10,000 years, they probably couldn't reach level 2000. In other words, below a level 9 civilization, it was almost impossible for level 2000 armor to exist. As for god-tier civilizations, he wasn't sure. Even Chiya didn't know. Chiya knew a lot of gossip, but when it came to specific data on god-tier civilizations, he was clueless. Those things weren't bedtime stories. I'm standing on a step that no one should have reached yet. The stronger I am, the easier it is to become a target. After the upgrade, a new super effect appeared. Level 2000 super effect of the train's steel armor. The ship will resist all dimensional reduction attacks, eternally immune to dimensional reduction. This is pretty good. Chen Meng smiled. At this point, the armor's level didn't matter anymore, because 500 and 1000 had already locked down the two basic types of damage. What he looked forward to were the super effects. And this time, it was truly worth the money. The 20,000 trillion was well spent. He might not use this effect immediately, but later on, when facing higher-tier civilizations, if the enemy had dimensional reduction weapons like a two-dimensional foil, this would be a lifesaver. The next level to unlock a super effect was 5,000. Was 5,000 the ceiling? Or was it higher? Or was there no limit? Chen Meng looked at the super effect panel, a hint of bewilderment flashing in his eyes. The more I know, the more I realize how little I know. If there's no ceiling, then what is the peak? After that, he shifted his gaze to a photonic energy arcanon main gun. Consuming 5,000 trillion iron ore, he upgraded that cannon to level 2,000. 5,000 trillion was the cost to upgrade a normal 7-color grade accessory from 1,000 to 2,000. This number would have been enough to suffocate him in the past. But looking at it now, it wasn't unbearable anymore. Level 2000 super effect of the photonic energy arcanon main gun. The blast radius, under intense energy fluctuations, will be reduced to two-dimensional space, and this process is irreversible. A two-dimensional foil? Chen Meng froze. He was just guarding against dimensional reduction strikes from others, never expecting that he himself would possess this method. With that kind of attack, no matter how high the armor was, it was meaningless. That was the nature of a dimensional reduction strike. But the cost was also terrifying. A single shot from a level 2000 arcanon required 1 million trillion units of iron ore. Yes, 6 zeros. 1 million trillion. Little Fatty's father was as rich as a nation, leaving behind nearly 30,000 trillion iron ore. According to the calculations of higher-tier civilizations, 10,000 trillion iron ore equaled 1 base unit of iron ore. Only when reaching that level was it considered foundational accumulation, so they used a new unit. 1 base unit of iron ore was equivalent to 10,000 trillion iron ore. In other words, I just touched something that can wipe out an entire battlefield, but firing a single shot burns through the entire wealth of a lower-tier civilization. This wasn't a weapon. This was a life-or-death choice. Little Fatty's total wealth was 2.98 base units of iron ore. Quite staggering. Because base unit was originally a counting method for higher-tier civilizations. A normal merchant theoretically wasn't even qualified to touch that term. Yet the cost to fire a single shot from a level 2000 arcanon main gun was 100 base units of iron ore. Meaning even if he brought out Little Fatty's father's entire fortune, it wouldn't be enough to fire. To be able to fire it, he had to multiply that wealth dozens of times over. This was absolutely not a method a level 5 civilization could possess. Even if given to a level 5 civilization for free, they wouldn't have the resources to use it. From when he destroyed the ultimate evil civilization, to destroying the Halmo civilization, and then passing through the Nanmei civilization, he had never seen a civilization that could normally fire a level 1000 arcanon without using spatiotemporal reversal. At most, they only dared to go up to level 700 or 800, where the consumption wasn't too drastically different from level 500. But when the cannon reached 1000, the consumption immediately underwent a qualitative change. Just a single shot from a level 1000 arcanon was nearly 100,000 trillion iron ore, or 10 base units of iron ore. Only he dared to treat this thing as a normal attack. Besides him, no civilization dared to play like that. Because the planetary train had a planetary cabin, it shouldered 99.99% of the energy consumption for the main guns. A level 1000 arcanon shot for him only cost 10 trillion iron ore. As for the level 2000 weapon of mass destruction, equivalent to a two-dimensional foil, firing a single shot only cost him 100 trillion iron ore. Absurdly cheap. This was what truly terrified others. It wasn't just about being strong, but being strong and able to fire it like it was nothing. Even so, Chen Meng sighed softly. Even though the level 2000 super effect was a weapon of mass destruction, he still wanted to limit its use. This was an absolutely loss-making method. What was war for? For resources. But if he fired one shot and that space collapsed into 2 dimensions, where would he harvest the resources? What is two-dimensional space? It's a painting. He wasn't Ma Liang with a magic brush. Once it turned into a painting, where was he supposed to dig up a single unit of iron ore? Wiping them out was easy, but after killing them, he'd also burn away the very reason for killing them. Even so, the corner of his mouth twitched up slightly. Now it's enough. Initially, the ship had about 4 base units of iron ore. After a series of enhancements, only 1.5 base units remained. The number plummeted, but in exchange, his power skyrocketed. More importantly, The human civilization was currently a level 5 civilization, just one step away from level 6. Previously, he thought that even if level 6 was stronger than level 5, it would only be slightly better. A few more tricks, slightly higher combat power, broader territory, thicker resources. Something like that. But now he knew just how wrong he was. Even the trashiest level 6 civilization was dozens, if not hundreds of times stronger than an ancient level 5 civilization. They weren't on the same plane at all. The tier wasn't just a number, it was a massive chasm. To upgrade to level 6, there was only one hard condition. The maximum attack energy output must exceed 200,000, and one must possess a civilization wonder. A maximum attack energy output exceeding 200,000 meant having a level 2007 color grade firepower accessory. Upgrading to 2000 was already an astronomical figure in terms of both resources and manhwa stones. But there was an even harder step. Not only did you have to own it, but you also had to fire that shot for the universe to inspect and record before being recognized as a level 6. For a normal civilization, without a planetary cabin, firing a single level 2007 color firepower shot would burn 100 base units of iron ore. An absolutely astronomical number. Being able to afford that number meant the foundation of that civilization was at least several hundred times thicker than a level 5 civilization. No mistake about it. Therefore, any level 6 civilization, even the weakest one, was not something a level 5 civilization could withstand. This truly is a dimensional reduction strike. Just as I realized the gap is standing right in front of me. Fortunately, Chen Meng breathed softly. Within the scope he knew, only the Pingchong civilization below remained unvisited, and that was also just a level 5 civilization. There shouldn't be any level 6 civilizations in this area. He still had time to develop. But right at that moment, the warning alarms in the ship blared continuously. Warning! Warning! Unidentified spatial fluctuations detected. The entire space within the Naya star system has been locked down. Cannot use any wormholes, spatio-temporal reversal, or any space-time-related methods. The blockading party is not hiding their identity. Level 6 civilization, Qingshan civilization. Chen Meng's expression completely changed. He had just told himself there were no level 6s. So why did one suddenly pop out? Where did it jump out from? It clearly wasn't within radar range. Right? If I can see them, they can see me. And since they're here, it means they have a way to bypass my eyes. But he calmed down very quickly. Looking at this type of lockdown, the other party didn't seem to understand him yet. Spatial lockdowns were practically meaningless to him. The refrigerator didn't fall under the scope of spatial fluctuations. As long as he wanted to leave, no one could keep him. The problem is, if I leave, what happens to Naya? And leaving means admitting I'm weak.